I call the meeting to order, the City of University Heights City Council meeting, Tuesday, April 10th. Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we're not talking about rental housing ordinances. We're going to talk about that on April 16th at 7 p.m. The council is all present, and first order of business is swearing in of Virginia Miller as council member.
So, Virginia, if you'd like to stand, raise your hand here. I, Virginia Miller,
I, Virginia Miller,
do solemnly affirm
that
I will support the Constitution of the United States
I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially, to the best of my ability, discharge the duties of the office of council member in University Heights, Iowa, as now or hereafter required by law. Thank you.
Congratulations. Welcome to the council, Virginia, and as you know, you're assigned to building, zoning, and sanitation. Thank you for taking that off my hands. The next order of business is approval of minutes, and the minutes have been circulated by the clerk, the March 6th regular council meeting, the March 7th special meeting, the March 22nd special meeting, and the March 26th special meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to any of these minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved, all four of them by unanimous consent. Okay, I want to ask first, do any council members have a conflict of interest on any agenda item? If so, could they declare now? Okay, I'm hearing nothing, so please make a note of that for your minutes. Thank you. So, first thing is public hearing on proposed amendments to the city zoning ordinance. And I want to read what it's about. Public hearing on proposed amendments to the city zoning ordinance number 79 concerning the following: modifying maximum height and maximum parking in the commercial hotel zone, requiring those submitting development applications to enter into agreements to reimburse the city for professional and administrative fees and expenses associated with consideration of their proposals and other related matters. I call the public hearing to order. Anybody would like to speak, they can come up to the microphone here and state your name and your address. Thank you.
Is this just on
This is the proposed zoning ordinance changes to the hotel. Okay, Jim.
Hi, my name is Jim Glasgow. I'm one of the hotel developers. So what we're really here for tonight is to see if the council, and beyond that, the city in general, wants us to put on a rooftop restaurant on top of the hotel. Now, we've shown some of the preliminary designs to the council, and it sounds like we're getting a lot of good feedback. One of the things that we would have to do as builders, if we do put the hotel, or if we put the rooftop restaurant on the hotel, then we have to restructure the roof system. We have to add sewer, grease sewer, gas, water, all the utilities that would be incorporated in a business on that level. So, and beyond that, we would want to increase the parking for the square footage of that restaurant. Now, we're probably going to be looking at somewhere around 5,000 square feet of restaurant space, and it depends how much storage space we have up there, how much kitchen we have up there, and we have outside seating as well. Right now, we're calculating about 8 or 9 feet of additional height to the ordinance that we would need to get this restaurant up at that level. It will be set back on pretty much all sides except the side facing the railroad tracks. So visually from the ground level, you're going to see very little of it. You may or may not see it from Olive Court or stepping way back. And again, I guess what our intention is at tonight's meeting is to see if there's encouragement from the council. I mean, we're not trying to push this on anybody. It's pretty much something that we've heard a lot of the residents in the town want. So we're just putting that proposal out there. And if you want us to continue, it would still be a proposed ordinance or a proposed site development review plan that you would have to approve in the long run, as well as this initial change of ordinance to give us the opportunity to proceed. So.
Well, thank you for that summary, Jim. I want to see if any of the public would like
And we do
to
have
comment
plans
on
again
it.
here if you want us to pull them up, I guess.
Well-
And our architect is here as well, so.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm doing the public hearing,
Okay.
and I'm glad you gave a summary because that helps the public here. Thank you. So would anyone from the public like to speak about this proposal? Okay, hearing none, I'm closing the public hearing. And before we go to that, I know some people wanted to speak tonight, and I'm going to move the public input up. And so that people don't have to wait. Several people told me they wanted to speak, and I don't want them to have to wait until after this. So would anyone from the public like to speak about any subject other than rental housing tonight? Okay, Mike?
Mike Ritchie, 20 Olive Court. I had reservations about bringing this forward to the city council, but after hearing Virginia's oath of office, I think this needs to be brought up about defending the Constitution and living up to the letter of the law. It was reported to me at the last election that Sylvia helped an elderly woman in here to vote at the polling place here. The woman got inside, was kind of confused, and she yelled out who to vote for, and people had told me that Sylvia said vote for the guy. And I think this is very highly unethical if this is true, and I urge the city council to investigate this matter further.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Samantha Miller, 254 Highland Drive. I came to vote last Tuesday and wanted to share this information with the community and the city council. I went to go vote and Sylvia was hovering by where you turned in your ballot, just standing off to the corner, not doing anything. She had already turned hers in. And I turned mine in and went to leave, and she asked another elderly lady who was in the process of voting behind me, oh, who did you vote for? I personally don't think that's acceptable behavior from a member of our city council, and if I understand the law correctly, I believe it's criminal also. And I would like the city council to do something, or at least hear it, or take care of this behavior.
Would anyone else like to speak to the council? Now, you all came just to watch, right? You didn't want to speak? Okay.
Well, Madam
Okay.
Mayor, I think I need to turn to talk about this.
Okay.
Number one, this individual is a neighbor on my street who did receive a flyer alerting the neighborhood that we're having, financial, it's a financial spring alert that I sent out. She was interested in voting. I contacted members of my community who I knew were interested in voting just to make sure that they were out voting. And this particular gal said she hadn't voted yet. And I said, I'm going out there myself. I'm happy to give you a ride if you're ready to vote. She said, sure. So my understanding in discussing issues with her, she had a particular interest with particular revenue and financing of the city. And she wanted to make sure that she was informed as to which candidate had supported the hotel, which she does support for revenue reasons. and also is concerned about increases in property taxes. This individual still lives in her home. By the time she got here, I stayed away from her voting area. As a matter of fact, it was another member of the staff who assisted her. And, asking about who you vote for is, I didn't think anything offensive at all. I shared who I voted with her, and she was inclined to agree with the financial positions of this individual. So I don't believe that there's anything other than a neighbor helping another neighbor based on issues that are important to them that they had asked me about. To the best of my knowledge, I provided information on those financial issues that were important to them. So that's what I know, and that's it. I didn't help her vote, I didn't press a button, and I certainly wasn't around casting her ballot. That was all done by members of the ballot committee at the county.
We'll go on to the zoning commission report. We're going to go back to the hotel, and the zoning commission met, and Pat Bauer is the chair, and he's going to give the report. Thank you.
Pat Bauer, Zoning Commission Chair, 338 Kozer. The Zoning Commission appreciated being invited to provide an advisory input to the City Council on the zoning matter that you have before you tonight. We got together probably 4 or 5 days later. We had before us the material that I think the council had received from the developers, a number of pictures, a floor plan, as well as the MPOJC analysis of traffic impact. I think the members of the commission expressed appreciation for the positives that have been identified about the proposal, it being something that members of the community might use more than they would simply the hotel. Its financial impact in terms of increased property taxes, and the solar panels on top. We thought that our time could best be spent trying to identify concerns that hadn't seemingly necessarily been popped up yet. Traffic had been addressed by the MPO-JC report. We didn't see any reason to question that. We did talk about green space. We didn't talk about that, I think, last summer, in part because of the assumption that the parkland dedication ordinance was going to be applicable, something that the applicant indicated that they agreed to in their application. In terms of calculating the green space, we had some problems because the resolution that the council adopted last December about parkland dedication not being required used a 54,000 square foot figure that is consistent with the MPO-JC report. But the PUD plan that was approved is about 20% less. It's about 44,000 square feet. So there's a discrepancy there that I think going forward probably should be addressed. We didn't have any numbers about the impact, but if you're adding 33 or 40 parking spaces, the thought would be it's got to reduce the amount of green space. There's precious little there already from the aerials that we have. We compared it to OUP and Grandview, which are about 50% larger in size, but percentage-wise, this is about half of the green space you'd have at OUP, Grandview, and about a third at OUP. Having said that, commissioners recognize that the solar stuff on top is environmentally beneficial and could be viewed as an appropriate offset, and that to the extent the revenue is used to purchase green space elsewhere, that's also a mitigating circumstance. So we didn't see any concerns there. We did note sound and lighting. You're putting up a rooftop restaurant. The impact on people over on Olive Court is a concern. Certainly we've identified the things that have been cited, that the wall in back and perhaps the solar panels acting as a baffle may minimize this, but one of our suggestions was that you obtain some independent professional input from someone like an acoustical engineer who might be able to bring to bear on this issue kind of technical expertise that we as lay people don't have. Having said that, we did look at the noise ordinance. We looked at the OUP development agreement, which prohibits outside speakers after a certain hour. And so Steve's attorney's report indicates, sound is probably something that could be addressed down the line as part of a development agreement or even thereafter. I think the one thing that all four commissioners were concerned about is the adequacy of the on-site provided parking. Part of that is the number. The number that's being used is 150 square feet of restaurant requires one parking space. We also were aware that the developer indicated they need 200 seats for this thing to be viable. The 150 comes from an ordinance that was adopted in 1982 that was largely descriptive rather than prescriptive. And presumably it was, although I don't know it would have to have been, it may have been looking to the university club. But our thought was, the thought was that the university club is a very different kind of operation than a public restaurant that kind of is open to the public at large. It's also a third of a century ago. And for all we know, it was borrowed from Iowa City. That's ordinance that could be even older. We looked at the Coralville ordinance, and that requires about 50% more. It's one parking space for every 100 feet of floor space. And conceivably, as I say, that may be a more recent thing. So I guess there was a strong suggestion that you folks look carefully. The other thing about the number, I mean, the number has no magic. When you're doing a PUD, you're prescribing specific things for this thing, and so the existing ordinance doesn't have any presumptive appropriateness. The thought was that this hotel is very, very different than hotels in Iowa City or Coralville that have to be located in downtown areas that have parking ramps nearby, that have on-street parking. This thing is being dropped in the middle of a residential neighborhood in which there is no on-street parking to speak of. So that was our thought at this point, to green light this without looking into the parking, the adequacy of parking. Now, we don't see this as a deal killer. The developer owns land to the south that could conceivably be deployed for excess parking. The university has a lot of surface parking down in the southwest corner of Kinnick, and they've recently numbered all those, so conceivably some sort of license could be obtained there. But adding 40, I mean, our understanding was that 156 was required by Marriott or necessary to support the hotel. So adding 40 spaces for a 216-seat restaurant, I think Commissioner Haugen did the math. If everyone arrived as couples, it'd be 108 cars. And if people arrived 4 to a car, it'd be, 52 cars. Mayor Fromm pointed out that some people might walk, but I don't know how, many times a week they'd be walking there. The other thing that we noted is that the developers themselves have identified the maximum legal occupancy as approaching 400. And so presumably that might be space that would be very attractive for some sort of sunset reception. So if you are talking about 216, it might be twice that many for an event that doesn't have sit-down dining. So our suggestion is that the council look very carefully at the adequacy of the on-site parking and not run the risk of 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag, because once that thing is up and running, if you do have parking problems, they're going to be hard to address. So better to look before you leap and make sure now, using some independent contemporary assessment of the kind of parking that's appropriate for a hotel in today's day and age that's in the middle of a residential neighborhood that doesn't have any opportunities for off-site parking to speak of. Happy to answer any questions councilors might have about points I've made or the points that were reflected. Again, attached to the report that you received this weekend were excerpts from our zoning ordinance from Iowa City's. We had noted a 1,000-foot discrepancy in the numbers, but apparently that's been recognized as a discrepancy because the move went from, 33 to 40 in terms of the additional parking spaces. But
Exactly.
Again, we didn't see any drawings as to that we knew were showing where those additional parking spaces are coming from and what the place is going to look like with those additional we understand that some of those are going to be underneath, but some of the surface are going to be taken out by the ramp. So I guess that's the principal point, which is kind of throwing up a yellow flag about parking.
Any questions? Thank you so much. You met so quickly. That was very
Thank for
nice of
asking
you.
us to
Yeah, thank
provide
you. Okay, we'll hear from the developers. Who wants to start here? To answer some of those questions, I think would be good before we have consideration
Yeah.
by the council.
Trying to think. Do you want to open up my file?
Which ones?
It'll say parallel parking. It's in all cap letters.
Okay.
While she's opening that up, could I ask a question? So, Pat referenced, how you own the property to the south. Do you see any opportunities if this is constructed and the restaurant's going and there's overflow that's going into the community? Do you see an opportunity in your property to add parking if that would be a need?
Currently, that property has 33 bedroom apartments, and we only have 71 parking spots on that property right now. So currently, we don't have enough adequate parking for every tenant on that property right now. So we're always, they're always parking down that lane and down around. If you notice, there's a lot of parking down Woodside Drive because of that exactly. So yeah, right now, we have less than we need currently over there. So.
Could you talk more into or pull the
Sorry.
microphone up or something? Because I don't know if everybody can hear. Thank you. I know you're kind of tall. Did anybody tell you that?
No, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Try to scroll down to the bottom, or pull that print down to the bottom of it. There you go. And this was a concept drawing only. You can see how we put parallel parking down the very bottom of the property. We took out some green space right there on that very bottom row. I don't have my pointer tonight, but that was a concept. Yeah, it's just that. Oh, perfect.
You do have a pointer.
Yeah, right in this area right here, we put, this is like say a concept drawing, where we added this parking right here to help with the restaurant needed parking spaces. And then I want to move this dumpster over here, but it's some other items that we want to work on. But that's kind of where we're thinking, along with the entrance to the, I think I have another one in there.
Is this the drawing or the renditions that zoning saw?
No, this is just something that I had my engineer just kind of toy around with.
After zoning met or before?
What's that?
After zoning met? Because Pat Bauer is saying you don't have enough spaces. So my question for you is, this picture, was this submitted to zoning, or had it not been submitted to zoning?
It was not submitted to zoning.
Okay, so you're thinking of creating an entire length of new parking spaces on the southern border
Correct.
of the
Absolutely.
property?
Correct.
Is it on both sides, just on University side, or is it also on Iowa City side?
This is existing here. This parking right here is existing
Mm-hmm.
on this side. Just creating on this side. On our PUD plan, this right here is green space.
Mm-hmm.
So we took out that green space and put this in.
So are we looking at 196 spots here?
Like I say, this was a concept plan that he was toying around with. I don't think we were, let me just.
So there's about 16 or so extra.
It's about 36. I think it's about 36 of the 40 of what we need. I think this is about this would show about 36 because we have underground parking that we don't show on this right now. I just saw this tonight and I just threw this in there. Anyway, I just wanted to show this because Pat was wondering where that extra parking was coming from, and this was just an idea of what my engineer came up with. But this right here, in this area right here, that we will have underground parking coming out right from underneath the building. I think I have I think he had, can't remember what it was named.
Underground schematic?
Underground
Schematic. Hold on.
And I have another question. Did y'all base the 40 spots needed for the restaurant off of our zoning codes, or did you base that off of independent research into what a restaurant of your size would require for staff? and patrons?
Just what my engineer kind of came up with for this particular item. So I think he based it, I really don't know what he based it off of, so sorry.
Okay.
But right here, this is kind of what the going underneath the hotel would look like along, and this was another idea of the parking in this area here, in that green space. This was just a concept drawing. Like say, this is nothing that is set in stone. It's just concepts, but you could see some parking in here. This is green space here. So this was kind of what it would look like. We took out a bunch of spaces here to get this ramp down to go underneath.
So that's the ramp going underneath?
This is the ramp. This is the
I
ramp
see.
going underneath the hotel right here.
And then that's another
And that eliminated
suggestion of
No.
parking?
That eliminated 9 parking
That
spaces.
eliminated 9 spots there.
Mhm.
What's that, Louise?
And then this is just another suggestion of a
This is
parking
another- a ramp.
option?
Exactly, another suggestion. He did put looks like he did put the dumpster over here for us on this one.
Well, I count 12.
And so there's 20 spaces underneath, is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Looks like
There
he
are
might.
30 spaces underneath.
30? Oh,
30, yeah. But
Okay.
9 got taken out, so 21 net.
You have about a net gain of 20.
2021, okay.
So, looks like he, do you remember that parking over there before?
Pardon?
Do you remember that being there?
Well, you're.
That was parallel
That's the interior. You're not looking at
Oh.
totally west.
No.
You're looking at, those are spots that are on the interior parking area.
So essentially, I think we could make it work if we
Oh,
just
I
had this.
see.
To kind of sum it up, I think we could make the parking work if we had this green space here to work with.
This plan, he shifted a lot of the green space to both sides of the ramp, and then shifted some of the parking over to the adjacent, and backed it up towards our apartment project. So
I do have one more plan that's called parallel parking in bold letters. Wait till you see this one. This one's
So
fun.
this will be option 3.
Option 3, but probably you guys, I don't know if you would want this. Scroll down. I think that's the parallel. I meant to say the perpendicular, my bad. Yeah, so here's the same area. But if we were to give up part of our property on the south side of this, if we were to give up some land and we could put in the perpendicular parking here, that would give us plenty of parking. We did it like that.
And would that still include?
So
the
you're
urban
talking
parking?
your Iowa City side.
Yeah, Iowa Seaside. So if we were to kind of create an easement, or I don't know how the legal term of it would be, but we could create a lot more parking if we did it like that right there.
Do you keep
So
that?
essentially,
Greg, do you keep the underground parking in that plan, or do you get rid of it?
yeah, we still need the underground parking,
Okay.
I think. Oh, question. Like I say, these are all concept plans that I just kind of.
So this is a lot more parking than
Yeah. Now, there's
Uh,
islands, there's actually islands.
189.
Tree islands in the middle of that too, If you can tell, the ones with the arches on top are tree islands.
And how many spaces is this?
That's probably,
It looks like about
30.
34 spaces. I
Yeah.
just counted them.
Above ground.
Hmm?
Above ground.
Above ground.
Above ground,
yes.
yes.
And then the underground part of it would be another 20.
right.
So you'd have actually 55 parking spots if we did it this way. So to kind of sum it up, I think all we would need is this green space right here to get the parking that we need for the restaurant.
And another question I have with respect to the proposal, this one right here is, are you assuming 100% occupancy of the hotel rooms plus guests coming into the restaurant? Is that why we're doing these parking calculations, or are you doubling up on any of the hotel parking spaces that, on the presumption that not everything is occupied on any given day?
I don't know, that's a good
Well,
question.
Marriott requirement is 1-to-1.
Hmm.
So in other words, we need 140 spaces to satisfy Marriott.
Okay.
So potentially what you had left over would be a combination of maybe employee parking if there is any, although we've got them off-site. So you potentially would have 50 to 60 spaces left over, depending on how many we can actually get on site. And I guess that's my preference, is I don't want to be short parking if we do this. I mean, I agree with what Pat was saying there, that we need to really calculate the capacity and look for the maximum usage. What we're finding in our other hotel, though, is people, we've been running 100% full the last couple weekends because of the wrestling, and our parking lot is not full. So people are busing, Uber, things like that. So where you actually put the number of needed parking spaces is kind of up in the air. But like I say, Marriott's requirement is 1-to-1.
Mhm.
Did you say your staff parking was off-site?
Yes.
Where's that?
Well, we got right next door. We have spaces for them, and then we can park them over in our apartment complex too.
To the south?
Yes.
And
And
where,
we'll probably only do that when we know we're going to be 100% full. But
And that includes restaurant staff?
pardon me.
And that includes restaurant staff?
Oh, no, I guess I didn't calculate that in, yeah. And that's probably going to be, that might be 9, 10 people, so. Now, I don't know, see, our staff right now, a lot of them bus in, or they don't bring their cars to the other one, so I guess that's something we'd have to discuss with the restaurateur, the owner of the restaurant, because we're planning on just leasing the space to some other entity.
So there's 3 options for parking, is what you're looking at.
Yeah, I think, like I say, as long as we could acquire that green space on the south end edge of the lot, I think we can make it work. When we go to do to amend the PUD agreement,
Yes.
I think we can, the council has to approve whatever drawing, that we bring forward in the PUD development agreement.
Mhm.
So whatever you guys decide, to get the 40 extra spots needed, I think we could work out an agreement with you guys, and I foresee all we would need is that green space on the south side to make it work, and obviously underground parking. So,
Right. I guess one of the things that I haven't, I just want to confirm, you and Jim are both the joint owners of that southern property. There's no other party involved in the title.
just me and him, yep.
Wow, pretty easy. Okay.
If you add all those spots on the south, is there any way that, and plus the underground spots, is there any way you could have more green space elsewhere since we add so many on the south?
Yes, these spaces here could, a portion, you see, if you pull that back down a little bit. There you go. See how this does an S-curve right here? Right there in that area? We could get rid of some of these spaces here. and potentially bring this more straight and then curve it back.
Sure, to increase the green belt there.
Yeah, we could
Mhm.
increase the green belt a little.
Yeah, the only thing about that, Nick, on that side is we've already got 22 feet, but we had also looked at a plan where we put islands there too as well, and I think that's probably an appropriate way to go, but we already have the 22-foot strip there, so.
And again, these are details that absolutely we could work with the city council and figure out the best way to get the parking in here after.
Well, in something like that, if you started maybe omitting those spots and then, needed them in the future, is that
That wouldn't be that hard.
construction-wise?
Yeah, I mean, if you took out 4 or 5 spots there and then later you find you're backed up with, parking needs, you could probably reduce them, have a tree. I put the tree in the exact spot where you could maybe start out with 20 or 30 feet and you could reduce it to 10 or 15 if you needed to, but that's probably a smart way to go. And the other thing too, we could quickly bring a lot of different site plan proposals. We had 3 or 4 that we've generated already. So, but we had no input from council or zoning, and I guess something like this one doesn't show the ramp. I mean, this would probably be the most aggressive as far as number of parking spots, and it actually opens up more green space when you take out those 9 spots across. It doesn't look quite as congested as it is there, so.
Yeah, I would appreciate, omitting as many of those other spots on the greenbelt as possible, moving the dumpster, to
Yeah.
is it the east?
Yep.
Yeah, that.
And then-
I definitely plan on doing that because the truck,
Yeah.
the dumpster truck will have to come in and then just go right into it. I definitely will be wanting to put that on the east side.
Any more questions about parking? Did you want to talk about the restaurant too? Did the council want to talk about some of that? Virginia, did you want to look at some of that?
Sure, so my understanding is that everything faces the railroad tracks, correct? And so then for the outdoor portion, there's gonna be a wall there that would,
Yeah, I don't think you were here during that presentation, so you want to bring up the overhead view picture.
are there windows that face back towards Olive on the indoor portion?
Yeah, Will can address that if you want.
Okay.
All right, thanks. I'm Will Downing, Borbach Associates. Let me know if I'm not being picked up with the microphone. So this is the schematic of the rooftop restaurant, we said. So this wall here is facing to the southwest towards Olive Court. So it would be entirely opaque and set back 10 feet from the perimeter of the building, so that both effectively reduce the visual height and not have any light or sound leakage towards the residential area. So the dining area and the outdoor dining area would all be facing to the northeast, towards, parallel with the railroad tracks, towards the hospital and the stadium. Hope that's clear enough. And you can see the entrance down below for orientation. Okay. If you want to look at the view from Olive Court,
That's a new one, isn't it?
a new one, yes.
I didn't see that,
Okay,
yeah.
so this is a series of slides just to orient us, so that's.
You want me to do this?
Yeah, go ahead and step through it, please. So that's the site as it is today. The layout of the site and the building and its context. A little bit of, greened up. The site. And there's the building. And then
Just appeared.
go ahead and, and go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So last week, we went out and stood directly in front of that house on Olive Court, took a photograph towards the project site, and we used this three-dimensional model and our not understanding of the contours, elevation of the ground, to do a photo match, camera match of what you would see from that point. So, let's show the next one. So that's the original photograph right there. And you can see that it was kind of a gray day last week. The next photograph, the sky is a different color because we've changed it and added in the hotel. And the third one is the hotel with the rooftop restaurant. So I don't know if you were able to just click between slides without scrolling because it makes it a little bit more effective.
I know, but it's not working. That's the
Okay.
problem.
So that's the row of houses. And keep in mind, this is also late spring, winter, essentially. There's no foliage on the deciduous trees, so you see more. That right there is the press box, so quite visible from Olive Court. And the
I
hotel
see.
is just starting to poke over the homes across the street. So that tells the story, essentially.
The next slide show in different color. On down. Is that the last slide?
This is the last slide. Yeah. So, maybe just scroll up to the previous one up there.
You want that one?
Yeah, you scrolled back up to that one. So between that and that's without anything, and then directly below it, we've added the hotel. Not working.
No. Sorry, well, we're experiencing technical difficulties here.
Sorry. Well, I think we can still see essentially that because of the lay of the land and the building is not really all that tall. You can't, from Olive Court, there's not a great view of the building. It's not, it's pretty well blocked by the foliage and the other buildings in the neighborhood.
Okay, and are there any questions for Will, the architect? Do you want to talk again what you want from the council? And then they might have some questions.
No worries. So essentially, we're just needing for this particular first thing is an ordinance change of 156 to 196 spaces, and then the height of the hotel from 65 to 74. And once we get that, if we can do that and we can get that ordinance changed, then we will move forward with a new PUD development plan to amend the old PUD development plan to acquire the rooftop restaurant amenity, parking amenity. So essentially at this point, we're just looking for an ordinance change to move forward. So we can move forward. If we get the ordinance changed, then we will go through with the adding a third elevator on our plans, doing all the mechanical things that we need to do. Basically, we have to move the stairwells in. There's a lot of architectural things that we need to do to our hotel to make this rooftop restaurant work. So, and if we can get the ordinance changed, then we'll move forward with that. So,
When would you be ready with those plans then? Would this be for the May meeting or or maybe Steve can address
if we
when-
get the ordinance changed and we wanted to move forward with the restaurant, when how long do you think it would take to get the plans? I think the civil plans, the exterior, I think we could get that by the May meeting really simply fast, but I
We
don't
could
know.
get the schematic plans for the PUD submittal by the May meeting. That's, yes.
We could be well underway to get the project started and completed, yeah.
Just one little bump, though, is we have not gotten approval from Marriott on the plans we've submitted so far. I mean, we were supposed to have it by this week, and they're backed up with 300 and some projects. So we haven't even, gotten approval on what we have so far yet. So we do have to deal with Marriott in this mix as well. And that's just one other entity that we have to get on board too, so.
So Steve, what would happen? What, could you kind of walk us through
Yeah.
some of the legalities?
Sure. So there's two things I think largely that would have to happen. The first is what's before you tonight, which is consideration of changes to the zoning ordinance. Zoning ordinance sort of sets the framework for what's permitted, height, setback, number of parking spaces, the sorts of things we're talking about tonight, and the sorts of things you've considered previously. And then the zoning ordinance provides that if someone wants to develop the property pursuant to that ordinance, Greg and Jim in this case, then they have to submit a PUD development application that has a whole bunch of stuff in it, which they've done, and the council has approved what's been submitted, and there's some more to come. So, given if the ordinance changes, then the application for the development will need to change, and then the council will consider that as well. So, first you change the zoning ordinance, then you consider, and if you desire to, approve the amended PUD development application.
And that could be done in May, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be the ball, if the council approves the zoning ordinance change, then the ball's in the court of the developer to submit the amended application. But yes, it can be done, it could be done in May.
Well, I know it's been concerned by expressed by the council that they don't want to delay the start of the project.
Right.
When do you see the start of the project?
June, July. I
Whoa.
think is the development agreement, Steve, I think it's July we have to get started by.
Yeah.
So I think we could easily get started by June, July.
Okay. Does council have any more questions?
I just have a question for my fellow counselors. Do we want to, should we change this 196 to 211 to represent the perpendicular parking plan? I mean, do we want to go ahead and include more parking right off the bat?
Yeah, I was going to mention that too, with the understanding that, my support of the zoning ordinance would be based on a PUD development plan that, the PUD would need to reflect some of the things we've talked about today, because that's obviously the game changer for me.
An additional item that's not addressed in this ordinance either is that the conditional zoning agreement needs to be revisited so that the city has an opportunity to extend its interest in the historical house on the property. Currently, as written, the timeline for the historical house is set to expire June of this year. And as council is well aware, we are cash-strapped and looking for green space and parkland. So I think if we are to arrive at any decision, the Staub House needs to be part of that discussion as well. And I don't think it would be problematic because under the outer limits of that agreement, the city has a total of 12 months to find a spot. To move it, to keep it on the property, on the development property. But currently, as written, if we don't find a spot before 6 months, it expires and we have to demolish the historic house, which many residents have expressed an interest in keeping and moving somewhere within University Heights for purposes that would be used for the public.
Well, that's a discussion for council.
Right. No, but I'm just saying, in addition to Nick's,
PUD.
to the next PUD concern, I'm saying this is another one that needs to be
Right.
raised.
Under the conditional zoning agreement.
Right.
and discuss there too.
So Steve,
Well, let's
let
take
me
this
ask
one
you,
at a
we have to pass this ordinance tonight before they can take the next step to develop the PUD amendment, is that correct?
I don't think the council could entertain an amended application until the zoning ordinance is changed. You don't have to do it tonight, but yes, you have to do it before they.
Well, I move to approve the ordinance, so we can get this moving. I certainly don't want to delay, digging. So, I'm satisfied with what you've presented tonight.
Dottie, do you mind if I ask a question for clarification? What if we're approaching the south parking addition that you talked about, but then omitting some of that west parking? What number of spots are we talking about for what we're discussing tonight?
Well, my plan was to lose 3 to 5 parking spots on the west and then gain almost 30 on the south. So,
Plus the net 21?
no, more like a net 25, plus the net below.
That's what I was talking about, the net 21 below.
So closer to a net 45 to 50. If you,
It's
that's
gonna
our
be-
best scenario.
I would say netting between 45 and 55. Just from guessing at it.
Yeah, we just need that number, don't we, for the
I
set
think,
ordinance? Yeah.
because we're doing the height and the parking.
Yeah, currently the
And
ordinance.
So,
right
do you wanna
now
pull
you're
that-
saying
You want to pull that
two-
the perpendicular plan up?
Right now,
can
you're
just-
saying 226.
There.
Yeah, we need to know that number. It's not 226,
196.
196.
Yeah.
226. 196, we got to get a new number.
If we were to get 20 spaces underneath for under the hotel parking, and I just counted 35 on that south side. So that would be 55 more that we could potentially get right now. But then we could take out whatever, Nick, whatever you wanted to take
On
out
the
on this
west.
west edge.
Can we, can you take,
I say increase the green belt.
yeah, I would just want to take out as many as possible for
Right.
now, with the understanding
We
there's
could
that
take out-
flexibility. I
We
mean,
could take out 15, and currently there's 1, 2, 3.
That's a fair chunk.
There's exactly 15 there now. So we could pretty much wipe out that whole side
Yeah,
of
it's
west
15.
parking.
And it's right for some of the larger homes that would be backyard neighbors to that property area. So that's,
So minus
There would be no
15.
parking on that side at that point.
It's plus 40.
Just be a drive.
Back to the same number.
mhm.
If you
I think
subtract
length is pretty good.
15 from 55, then it's 40,
You're back at
right?
40, correct. So that would just be back to the same one.
Isn't that the same number?
Same number we're at, yeah, back to
Okay,
196.
196, okay. That's what I was going to say, I think that's the same number,
Yeah, exactly.
unless
Okay. And then
council
in what
wants to
language-
just,
But that also requires us to excavate our south property line as well. But this is definitely something that we can work out.
Yeah, I appreciate, the opportunity to do that on the south, to free up more green space on the west.
right. I mean, the worst case scenario that we're looking at is either because of the parking issue,
60.
you have to shrink the restaurant in order to get less parking, right? So we're looking at a conundrum.
you don't wanna do
So
So we're still
I
at
think that,
74 and 196.
moving it onto your Iowa City property,
think
south of the
Math,
development site is the right thing to do.
which isn't good.
And two, I don't know what sort of consideration, if any, should be given to the idea that we are having the discussion about that overflow parking concept.
Yeah, even if we say for instance, the overflow concept and, you know, I don't, because that's Iowa City. So I don't know if Iowa City had an issue with, say hypothetically, Iowa City had an issue with that. We could still get the 40 by the parallel on this side and keeping the west side.
Well, and also, I guess I'm thinking about the zoning commission's concern too. You know, if we got to the point where, without the west parking, you know, if we're having people spill into the community, you know, that might be a place where that could be expanded. The west side could be expanded.
Well, we could also use turf stone, you know, in those areas and have, well, it looks like, I mean, the university uses it, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a waffle pattern and the grass grows right up through it. It looks, if it's done right, it looks like grass, but you can actually park on it.
What did you call it?
Turf stone.
Turf stone. Huh.
They have it at the university, at the new art building.
Oh,
You'll see
okay.
it along that, the one that goes up the hill there.
Oh, okay.
That's where they do their service parking.
So you're saying if you needed it on the west, you do that, or are you looking to do that initially?
Well, you could do it initially, or you could, you know, that's the way you could do it in the end. I like to do it initially, because a lot of times people are jumping the curb anyway, and parking on the grass, so you might as well do it.
So Steve, can we work some of this parking issues out with the PUD?
Yeah, the zoning ordinance just sets the number. You know, where it
Right.
goes, what it looks like, those kinds of things are exactly what you would work out with respect to a
Okay,
development
and so
agreement.
it still looks like the number's the same, 196, except
like
if
to
you
increase that
add
to 206.
those extra.
Unless,
Here,
well,
just to have that flexibility, and it doesn't mean you're gonna build all 206 parking spaces. I like the idea of trying to keep that buffer on the
Otherwise,
side if
if you add
possible, but I think it would be
15.
smart to bump this up to 206. for this user.
So you could expand if you had to, yeah.
Well, and we do have a sidewalk, you know, on that west side, we've got that sidewalk running through too, so we gotta make sure we keep that open. One of the other things that I would just mention, our current hotel, we've had now 4 or 5 months of utility usage, and this is a 100-unit hotel. We're running $4,500 a month in utilities, which is about less than 50 or 60%. I mean, it's way down from what we have on normal hotels, and we don't have solar panels on that one. So we really think this hotel, using the same variable flow rate refrigerant system, that we can cut our utilities down by 50% for sure, and maybe more with solar panels. So.
I mean, I'm just brainstorming, but I'd almost prefer to just assume that we don't need the parking for now and keep the number at 196, and then just have that idea, you know, kind of cross that bridge when we come to it. You know, because I just don't know. I mean, if we put the stone out, but what you actually need are permanent spots there, then that's seems like it'd be counterproductive. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the turf stone acts as a retention basin as well. I mean, it really,
Water flow.
it's kind of like an absorption field. So that's what I like about it. It's a good absorption field. It never really gets torn up. I mean, you mow it like you mow your grass, but if anybody, and in this area, I expect a lot of foot traffic, all kinds of traffic. So it's just a real durable type of surface which still looks green.
When does that
We
get?
had envisioned using that space for like evergreen plantings for visual barriers.
Well,
you know.
that's 6 feet above. Evergreens are, I mean, I'm talking about the space that's down below the wall, and actually below the sidewalk even.
So how about a solution here, a temporary one, and that would be contingent on future traffic, you know, parking needs, but why don't you amend your design to have the turf stone, but the ordinance doesn't reflect an increase in parking spaces, but you've set aside essentially a demarcation for the potential to come back to council at a later time, but it's not in the ordinance, so you have, you know.
And that's fine. I mean,
and we can do that if the number is more than 196. There wouldn't be any reason to do that if the number stays at 196. because we can get the 196 like this here. So
Do you-
so if you
The
go to
perpendicular
206,
parking.
If you go to 206, then yeah, the turf stone would be, we would need to put the turf stone in there for potential future.
Well, is
So
that
the-
what, is
so
that what you're
the-
saying, we put it in but don't call it parking, or?
Right.
Yeah, I think
So it's
that's,
almost like a,
Smart
I'm not
idea.
sure if you think that's a.
Well, I was going to ask Steve about that. What are your thoughts in terms of putting turf stone in the PUD but not calling it a parking spot? But it sounds like it might get used temporarily. I don't know if people are going to be
I don't-
driving on it, and
Well, enforcement by the hotel.
Well, as a developer, we wouldn't, if we don't have an ordinance saying that we can do it, why would, we wouldn't want to spend the money on it, is what I'm getting, you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
I mean, I think if it's going to be parking, you should call it parking.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if it's going to be below the wall, and anyway, I was thinking too, if it were adding to the buffer a little bit more, but it's still adding green space and water drainage, it sounds like. So it's maybe kind of a compromise. Call it parking, have it be the turf stone, and then increase the number of spots with the understanding in the PUD that it's not going to be looking like a parking lot. It's going to be a green space that is understood to be overflow parking. I don't know how that would be regulated exactly.
well, yeah, I mean, if somebody's gonna drive up there, they can drive up on it, but I mean, if you want to look at it, I don't know if any of you go to the Iowa City Dog Park, we installed quite a bit of it around the pond there at the Iowa City Dog Park. And then there's a good example of it over at the art building, just to see it really from the street. You can't really tell that there's anything there except grass. I mean, if it's done right, so. And
So what's the
we can present that
compromise?
proposal, and then we can tweak it too. I mean, I think all we need to know at this point is how many parking spaces real parking spaces we have to have, so.
What, Steve, how easy is it if we just put that space in there, whether there's turf stone or not, and it's not considered parking, to change it to allow it to be parking in the future after everything's done?
You'd have to revise the ordinance again. I mean, I think what you do is you, for example, would say in tonight's ordinance, if this is what you want to do, that the ordinance would permit 196 spaces. The developer could go resubmit or amend the PUD development application. It could show this turf stone, would show it as not being parking spaces. At some later point, the council wanted to permit it to be parking spaces. The council would have to, amend the zoning ordinance to allow that. I guess I don't know how these things work. Turf stone doesn't mean much to me. I just don't know what it is. But, my sense is if there's a paved area, adjacent to places where people drive and park, people are probably going to park there. And so I guess that gets back to questions about enforcement. So I just point that out. But the procedure would be what I said.
Yeah. But you'd have a curb. You'd have a
Yeah,
curb,
there's
so.
a curb- There's a curb by the sidewalk, so you can't run up onto the sidewalk.
I-
Pull that plan back up if you can.
Well, I still think though, I mean, if we have the parameters of the parking, we still have to submit the PUDs and get that approved. So, I mean, I guess what I would do is I'd probably present the proposal showing the ramp going down into the basement, though however many spots. We've got an elevator now, which might take out a spot or two, but, and then the spots along the south. And then I did have a plan where I took out quite a bit of that west parking and put in tree islands and with a mix of turf stone in between. So that is probably what I would present first and look at it and let you see if that's what you want to do, or if you're approved that, then we'd go that route.
Well, my preference would be to have it be just dirt, green space, grass, plantings, and, take out those west spots, and then have it be a situation that if we really needed the parking, then you turn it into parking in the future, or you turn it into turf stone in the future. That's my first preference, but I understand that you're the one that's, paying to do these transitions potentially, so that's why I was just curious about the
And
difficulties.
And that's easy to do. once we have the numbers on the, like Virginia was saying, that's easy to do with the PUD, development agreement. That's easy to do, and we can put that turf stone in there and call it, and change it whenever you want. But the hard part, like Steve was saying, is to change the ordinance. It takes, votes and 3 readings and all that jazz. So if you was just raise the number of the parking at this point, then you can, and then when it comes to do the development agreement, you can tell us what, how, when, where to put whatever you want on this site with the development agreement. You just,
Well,
you
is
prove it or you
the
don't.
ordinance now going to say that we're required to have
It's
196?
a maximum number.
Or is that the maximum?
Maximum.
Maximum.
That's what it says now.
So
Or would
you're-
it say?
You're governing us by the development
Yeah.
agreement.
I guess I was just trying to get, so I guess I'm in favor of the 196 probably right now, and then just leaving that as green space. And I mean, it's like anything though. I think if you do have the need and if it's impacting the community, I think the future council would just have to decide. If you're willing to present that as green space, just dirt, grass,
Right.
plantings, that would be my preference.
Yep, and no worries. It's just, we won't put in turf stone at this point in the game.
Right.
We'll just have to dig it up, put it in later.
Yeah.
Then I
That'd be
second
my-
Dottie's motion.
Right.
So do we have
So you have a second?
a
Oh,
second?
you had a second?
Yeah, I second.
And the second is,
I did.
you did. I'm sorry, Sylvia.
Virginia?
Oh, what?
Virginia did.
Okay.
Okay, I was going to say I heard something here, but, okay, so this is first consideration of ordinance number 226. Any other discussion? Roll call vote.
Herbold,
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Moore. Miller.
Aye.
Carried.
Okay. Next, we have second page. We have the committee report, and Dottie, did you want to start?
Okay, I sent it out, and first of all, I wonder if anybody has any questions about it. I also had a conversation with our acting police chief regarding the signage on no parking. And we are going to decide which locations are most amenable for putting additional signs saying a no parking or tow zone, no parking, tow zone, which will then give him the authority to tow the cars. Because the multiplicity of tickets, especially on a game day, it's futile because we never get the revenue, and we're stuck with the car, and we can't take the car away. So I think it's the only reasonable thing. So when we have the spots marked, we'll bring back and tell council. I also wanted to mention that I had the opportunity to talk with Lisa Green Douglas from the Board of Supervisors. And she started talking about the access program, which Sylvia will be talking about later. But what I also wanted to point out here is that for many years, we've had a very big mental health issue in the state of Iowa. And finally, excuse my voice, I have laryngitis. Finally, we have a new law providing throughout the state access centers so that every citizen will be within 90 miles of a center that would provide psychiatric help, substance abuse help, etc. The interesting thing is the vote was 48-0 in the House and 96-0 in the Senate, which is landmark, So Iowa has been behind on mental health issues for a long, long time. In talking with Lisa and the Access Center, she reminded me that Dobbins and Ron Berg had been here a year ago to talk to us about the center. And I knew about it because I had worked with Ron Berg at Mecca and Prelude to get this thing moving. And there have been many people go to San Antonio and are trained there, so that we're replicating that project. So I looked at the contributions that various cities in the county are contributing. And everybody has contributed something except University Heights. And so I would like to urge the council to consider allotting some funds every year to support this program, because it is essential. It combines the needs of psychiatric nursing with the criminal justice system, and it deals with people who have all kinds of trauma issues, substance abuse, alcoholism, drug abuse, criminal activity. And so many people are put in jail when they should be hospitalized or treated. And the purpose here is a facility, a house, an actual structure is going to be constructed that will provide these facilities for such persons. So I would like to urge the city to consider, and I think that we do get some money back every year from the One University Place, don't we, Steve?
We do.
Yeah, so it's not quite just that simple that it comes back. You have to, the council needs to take some action to have that happen.
Okay,
it's
but is it
available.
a possibility
Mhm. Oh,
that
yeah.
we would use it for this kind of purpose?
Right. And of
Yeah.
course, I'll be addressing that in the finance section of the
Okay.
report. So streets and sidewalks.
Because I had such a lengthy and extensive background in psych that I figured I'd pound the drum, because I think
I know you're passionate about it.
it
I
is
understand.
really
Yeah,
critical.
I
So
feel the
Sylvia will
same.
talk about the actual training program.
Okay, so can we go to do you have any questions for Dottie first with her report or anything? We'll go to Josiah's report. Is that okay, Dottie?
Yeah.
Okay, Josiah.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with several items on my report to update you guys and ask some questions and get some feedback. I'm going to start with the last one I had, since ULP is still here. I just wanted to go through it, see if you had any questions. Basically, it's an update that back at the end of March, we had notification that some tree clearing work had started. We weren't aware that that was going to start, so we contacted Greg that morning and asked him if that was the case, and if that was going on, can he hold off until we can figure out what the status is, and he said no problem. So we did go out there. Some of the trees were cleared on the north end of the Flom property in the corner, and some along 905 Melrose, which is the house to the north. So some of that work was done. Like I wrote in my report, I think most of those trees were trees that were identified in the current approved PUD plan to be removed. But like I said, I can't be 100% sure until they go out and mark the trees that everybody agreed in that plan were going to be saved and protected. So I followed up with Terry Gert, the building official. He issues the building permit. It was his opinion as well that the tree clearing should hold off until there's a building permit for the site, and in particular since there's critical trees that were identified being saved. So I called Greg back that afternoon, informed him of that. He agreed that he would stop any tree clearing work if that's the case until they get a building permit. But then also I asked him to work with their landscape architect, who was here through the PUD process, to go out on the site and identify those trees that everybody thought were going to be saved, just so that we can get them flagged on site, and then we can all agree that we got the right trees. And then they're also supposed to be protected with fencing in the critical root zone before construction starts. So I think that's what they're gonna do as well. So, anyway, that is the
Greg,
extent
did you
of
want
that tree.
did you want to
tree
speak
issue.
at all about that?
Since my conversation with Josiah, we have MMS went out to identify, they're in the process of identifying those trees. I was told by one of my employees that they're gonna paint them orange. Sounds like they've already, I haven't went over to look, but I know that there's a big portion of those trees identified right now, and we have yellow caution tape around them,
The trees you're going to save?
the trees that we're going to save, and also,
You're gonna
I've been
paint the
told.
trees you're gonna save orange?
I don't know. That's what I say. I gotta go over and
Seems
look.
backwards.
Yeah, I don't, exactly. So I gotta go over and see what they did, but I told my employee to just put caution tape around them, but he told me he had a conversation with MMS that they were gonna paint the tree orange, so I don't know. I gotta go see what they did, but, well.
Well, if you're
just
going to
orange.
save the tree, we don't want it orange, do we? I mean,
Well,
if you're going to
they're
get
not
rid of the
gonna paint
tree,
the
they
whole-
could be orange.
Black and orange.
They're not gonna paint the whole tree orange, just gonna make a mark on it probably with orange paint, I'm assuming. So, yeah,
Just
we're not
going
gonna.
by your words.
I will stop that if that's what they're going to do, so. But I haven't went over there and looked, but what I know that my guy did was he went over there and painted a whole bunch of, or not painted, he wrapped it with caution tape. Just tied a piece of caution tape around it. So a lot of those trees have been identified right now. So, just to kind of,
Can I
And
do a
what were your
walkthrough-
intentions?
Can I do a walkthrough on the site with you?
You bet.
At some point before you guys get started on that, just to
You
check
bet,
out the
absolutely.
protection zones and
No
all that?
problem.
Thank you.
What was your intention of,
I just wanted to get a start on the project. I'm kind of anxious.
Right.
Just wanted to get the shovel ready. You know, I didn't want to break any ground. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers that way. I just wanted to start removing some of the trees so to get the site shovel ready.
Can I just mention one other thing too, is we have to get in there and do geotechnical boring. So we have to bring in a boring rig, which I'm assuming that's okay, isn't it, Josiah?
Probably not.
That would be fine with me.
Okay.
I think, so you need to
We're putting in
put together construction plans. And those are based on the geotechnical
Yeah, yeah. So,
findings, so
yeah,
I don't think there's any other way.
we're probably gonna be using GeoPeer, so. Okay, just so you know.
You still want to keep that out of the root zone of the trees you're intending to save?
Yeah,
though,
yeah,
so-
it's just
Yeah,
some of
so-
the areas that where the hotel goes, which you know are gonna be cleared.
Yeah, okay.
That's where we'd like to do the borings.
When is that?
Pardon me?
When is that?
Well, Terracon is.
Yeah, Monday or Tuesday.
Of
Well,
next
Monday
week?
and Tuesday next week.
Okay.
Can I just ask, how much disruption will that be to, like, Olive Court residents? Will that shake their house? I don't know much about these boring.
We'll be all in on site.
Okay, it's not a
noisy.
big,
It's
okay.
it's just the sound of a truck engine.
Mhm.
I mean, not a big rig, I mean a pickup truck.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's like small sampling, the soiling. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
so you've now stopped?
Yeah, so basically I was gonna ask if it would be okay, I'm here asking if it'd be okay to continue after Virginia and I walk the site, if she wants to look at the trees, mark the trees, or anyone from the city to do so, to verify the trees that are being saved and let us continue, you know, getting the site shovel ready, so to save some time later.
So you're asking the council to consider. I did talk to Terry Gert today, and I did ask him that question. Would it be okay if they would, if the council gave him permission? Is that okay? And he said, sure, it is. But you know, he just wanted to protect the city if they were going to be digging a deep hole or something like that. Going ahead with construction.
Yeah.
So,
And, you know, weather's not
But-
been that great lately, so it was easy to hold off.
so does you want to hold off, or do you want to continue?
I guess,
I'd ask Virginia how comfortable are you being the individual who would give the go-ahead once you've marked the trees in the root
I
zone?
want to consult with Josiah for sure. I don't know the details of like what constitutes shovel-ready activity and
Right, we want to make
what is
sure, yeah.
outside of those boundaries.
Well,
but,
Building
Okay, well,
permit.
I'll just say just the trees. That's basically,
Okay.
I'm not gonna
I mean, I
dig
do think it
anything.
would probably be good.
You mean
to
just
get-
tree removal? That's
Yeah,
all
you're
I
talking
asked
tree
about.
removal.
Like, yeah, I,
Yeah.
think
I
it would
didn't
be
ask
nice to
about
get the site
anything
cleaned up.
else.
So I think one way of looking at this, if you weren't building a hotel and you were just taking over the house, and, I mean, you don't have to ask for a permit, do you,
No.
Josiah, for tree removal?
In that situation, no.
Yeah, so I think.
But this has a PUD plan with the trees as a critical discussion point, so it's a little different. But what I think we need to get those marked. Let's all agree on them.
I agree
Yeah.
on that.
Get them protected, and
Yeah.
then if you guys are okay with
Yeah.
them going ahead, I am too.
Yeah.
But without those in place, it was sort of like, what's going on?
Mhm.
Right.
I think we should go ahead and fence them off right now.
Yes,
Find those trees,
Yeah.
we'll go ahead and put our fencing around them, and then
sounds good.
we can take out whatever isn't gonna be saved.
Okay.
So what's the sequence? We're fencing them and then,
And then completing the cleanup work of the site, basically? Okay.
Yep.
With
is that
just
something,
trees.
is that something you're gonna monitor then in a
Well, there's
sense?
no need to do that once she marks them and goes around with,
Yeah, I'm okay.
And Laura Hawks.
Mhm.
Yeah, Laura can go too.
yeah,
Laura too.
yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a good plan.
Right.
Okay, that's consensus.
So next week.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank
I
you.
contact who?
Thanks for stopping
I'm saying.
when they asked you to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Josiah,
Okay. Couple other things here. I'm just gonna go back up through them, touch on a couple items. The new lights were installed by Mid-American down at Kosher. I haven't seen them at night. I don't know if anybody else has noticed them. I was gonna take a look tonight.
Paul probably has.
Sensitive areas mapping, the hard copy maps were received from EOR, and I have written down here that I've delivered those to the city clerk, because I was supposed to bring them tonight and give them to you. So I will follow up this week, and I'll bring them over to you, Chris. Just updates on past project, Highland Drive subdrain repair, still has some work in the spring for seeding. The city's annual stormwater report was completed and submitted update from last month's report. Now that brings us to Olive Court improvements. That's still a item on here. My question to you guys about, are we okay to proceed or not with design on that project?
I just sent you an email right before we stepped into this council. I got clarification from Lori. What I'm concerned about is making sure that we don't exceed our budget line item for this, because once we approve it in July 1, you can just as quickly pick that up. I think there's a reimbursement pending of $11,000 from University Lake Partners, the Marriott group. I think that is offsetting some of your budget, from what I recall, but I'm not ready to make that call right now. So I'd be happy to continue the email threads with you, just from a budgeting perspective.
But I think what you're asking before at the last meeting too, which there was I think confusion afterwards, is you would like to do the work for next budget year now, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Yes.
the project development schedule doesn't
Right.
always nicely follow the fiscal year schedule.
That's right.
And so to get that project ready for construction next year, we need to start working now
Right.
to get those things ready, through the design and all, the reviews and the coordination with all the utility companies.
Yeah.
Takes time, so we can get it ready to bid this winter, so the contractor's ready, so when
Mhm.
March rolls around, he's ready to go. So what I would like to do is to stay on that schedule. What I'm saying is we need to get going.
But how many hours do you
I would
estimate?
like that
And-
also, to move forward. Because I think the condominium development is almost finished, and I think they would appreciate Olive Court being, renovated.
Right.
And I think having all that construction, the hotel and the street.
Yeah,
like,
get
just
it over
done at
with,
once so
yeah.
that it's not drawn out forever
No.
for those residents. Yeah, I would like to see you start work on this again.
And the other thing, reviewing this with our office director, and I wasn't sure how critical the fiscal year was, but at this point, with just a month or two until that
Right.
time, we'd be fine saving those, whatever invoices are associated with that until after that July 1st date, if that's,
That would be great.
I don't know if that's beneficial, but
That's good.
That would be,
We can.
yeah,
That's good.
that would be, right, because.
Thank you for checking on that.
Right, because as of right now, before stepping into council, there was an $11,000 offset that's important to the equation of the financing of this. Mhm. So that's,
so
yeah, if you can hold
if
off
that's
for July.
amenable, then
Yeah.
I would like to,
Please go ahead.
I think we need to
Let's do
get
it.
moving. Okay. Next item, street sweeping. I did get that proposal from Pelling this morning. Basically, their rates are exactly the same as last year. And Dottie, I have that
I have a
proposal
question.
for you. I can drop it off.
Okay.
Josiah, how many times have we bid out besides Pelling? Have we tried any other vendors besides Pella?
In my records going back, I think Pelling's done it the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And before that, we had
A
a
small
trucking company, I think.
It is
You know, that
very
Br-
difficult
Brennan
to
McGrath.
even find
Yeah.
someone.
So
Well, we
we
have-
have not in the last 6 years. I think at that time, that company was like, we're out of this.
I
and
think, yeah.
Pelling was somebody
We
who
have
could do
a
it.
fine working business relationship with Pelling, and I would like to continue that as long as Shive is happy with that, I am.
I'm not questioning the happiness level of anyone. I'm just questioning the process of how we arrived at Pella and what the taxpayers have as a, regularly occurring
Well,
question of, is this being competed out? I think it's a fair
I would encourage
question.
you to try to find
So-
another company to do the work.
Well,
It's been very difficult to find anyone else who's willing to do it.
can we, I mean, I think that's a good process issue though, to generally get 2 bids if possible. I think this year it sounds like we're set, they haven't raised their rates, but I mean, I would agree it's good, I think, in the future going forward to try to reach out to a second company. I mean, I don't know if that's a council member, or if that's Josiah, if that's something you'd be interested in doing, but I think, as someone responsible for the city finances, we probably have a duty to do some sort of due diligence and trying to get a couple bids on that at least.
And that's all that it amounts to. It's not that I'm anti-Pella or pro-Pella. It's what makes financial sense.
well,
Why
my,
don't I start with that and see if I can talk to other cities or somebody and see if who else in this area might do it.
Appreciate
yeah.
that.
Super.
And I think, valuing our business relationship when we have no reason to disagree or we're not unhappy with his performance.
They keep not raising the rates too.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I mean, I'm not suggesting anything that would be offensive to LL Pelling. I'm just saying, I think that's probably just a good habit for our city to do.
Well, I'll drop off the proposal
Thank you.
to you
Yeah.
before I head
Good.
out. So they would look at doing that either next week or the week after to do the street sweeping.
Hopefully no more snow after
Yeah.
the weekend.
Well, yeah, assuming we keep going the way we are. All right, let's stick with Pelling. There's a pay application in Lori's warrants list for Pelling, which I wrote about. I'll go over it briefly. Please ask me a question if you have, but it's $536 and some change. The summary is that when Pelling submitted their final pay app for this project last fall, when we agreed the project was done, they, in coordinating with their seed and sod supplier this winter, determined they made an error. And so that seed and sod subcontractor actually did more work than Pelling submitted for. They laid it out. We went out this spring, once the snow melted, verified the numbers, so we think that they're correct, actually. So I told them, well, submit that as a pay app, and we can bring it before the council, which I've done. So I think the numbers are right. I think they did do the work, and, I mean, our recommendation is that you do follow up and pay for that.
Okay, we'll
Yes.
cover it during the warrants,
Yeah,
okay?
so that's the
Thank you.
update. The Iowa City fiber optic project that we've had on here for quite a number of months, waiting for some update from them. I did today get a set of up drawings from them for that project for review. So I'd let them know when we received it, we would review it. And I know that Steve has received a draft 2080 agreement from the city, from the Iowa City Attorney Office to him for him to review. So my plan is to review the plans as far as engineering goes, and then also probably work with Steve on, making sure the 2080 meshes with what's going on there. And in my mind, I do have the item with coordination with Iowa City for the west side right-of-way for future use for signage. So I'm not sure how to address that, but I do plan to review that with Steve on how we can incorporate that. And the last item is the bus stop. We didn't have some figures the last couple of months, but they sent them along for January and February, so those were attached to the report as well.
Any questions for Josiah?
With respect to the bus tally, is that, we haven't gotten there yet?
No, you reminded me of something else.
Okay, the bus tally, I did have a resident take a look at the data, so I shared it, and it looks like no one's coming home from work. How are the tallies being recorded, and
They're in the bar.
who's how's it done? Is the methodology? If you can get me a response outside of council, that would be great.
Okay, I don't
Unless
know.
you know it. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't explain that one either. But they're going in, they're just not coming back.
What you reminded me of, was that I also, when I talked to Iowa City Transit, they said the bus shelter should be installed in June. The ones that
Oh,
they
good.
put out for
The one that-
proposals and quotes
that
on
we
the
should have had
Grand,
last year.
in front of Grandview. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Anything else for Josiah? Okay, after you give the paperwork, Josiah, you can leave the meeting.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we'll go to Mayor's report, and I have an agenda item of discussion of prohibiting electronic smoking devices, and this was brought forward to me by the Johnson County Board of Supervisors. They want asking all the cities in the county about prohibiting electronic smoking devices, and this isn't included in the same place in regular cigarette ordinances. And so that was a little bit of a surprise to me in hearing that. And so this Susan Valletta, she's the health educator, and she is contacting the various cities and saying you can do a local ordinance if you'd like, or you could do just join in with the countywide from Johnson County when they go forward with it. And so I sent along the information about electronic smoking devices. She sent along, she said she could come and present something, and I said, well, I'll talk to the council first and see if they're interested in considering a local ordinance in this. And I gave many sample ordinances to Steve, so he said he could have something ready in May 8th, if the council wanted to proceed with this. So
Where would this apply? I mean, what is public in University Heights where this would be applying?
I think it's in the places like the restaurants, outside spaces of the restaurants.
Isn't that already taken care
Or
of by
even
the
the-
condo association articles?
Not specifically.
I
This
mean,
is-
like, I even think inside the restaurants too.
I mean, I think part of the rub is that there's some view or interpretation that these electronic devices aren't really tobacco, or
Right.
somehow aren't already prohibited.
And maybe even here.
Yeah. Oh,
I thought
You
we
know,
were
like in
already
here.
prohibited here by our
I know you're saying.
community center
OUP.
rules. Yeah. Well, that too. Two different sources, the UOP condo association and our own community rules.
I think we should pass it locally.
I know, I thought the restaurant owners could say something, but
Do we have feedback from Maggie's as to how they feel about this?
I didn't ask anybody. I just brought this forward. and-
Sure, no, we're having discussion, so I think it's healthy
I
to
didn't-
ask. Mhm.
I wonder what the state position is on it. Is there any, state legislation that mandates?
Mm-mm.
There's the Iowa Clean Air Act, but I think what you're saying is that cigarettes are,
Oh, they're
this
not
does
the
not
same.
fall under the definition of.
There's some question about that. I'm not really, way up on it, to tell you the truth. I know a lot of places in Johnson County are adopting this kind of an ordinance just
Yeah.
as a belt and suspenders approach, if nothing else, to make sure that these activities are prohibited.
Yeah, it's a
Well, when
different,
she called me, I said, it's funny, Susan, you called me because just during football season, just this past season, somebody in front of me, a college student, pulled out one of these smoking devices, and I said, wait a minute, you can't do this here. And they always say, oh, this isn't really smoke.
Yeah.
and this is a vapor, and this is, And she said, well, it is prohibited in Kinnick Stadium. Well, I just thought it was with the smoking.
no.
And I found out from her it's not. And she said,
I think erring on the side of caution and joining what the consensus is probably the better way to go.
Yeah, the North Liberty ordinance seems pretty straightforward.
that was one example. She gave me many. And I can ask her more questions. She gave her email address, but
Oh, I think you've provided adequate information.
so I just put it on the agenda in case the public, so they would be aware,
Yeah,
in
'cause
case they were for it or against it.
I'd like to find out a little bit more, especially what we have already existing from when UOP articles, the articles of the association, and also confirming what our own community center states about that. And the reason I bring this up is because, it's a lot less harmless to have these electronic cigarettes, and we're already taking away the smoking rights of individuals to congregate in public
I
areas
don't
with
know if there's
actual
been enough
cigarettes.
research to
So-
to agree with that, Sylvia.
The point, well, with respect to the user and the parameter that they're in, they're 3 foot. So my concern is that we're perhaps reacting a bit harshly on individual rights on an issue that is not as important as secondary smoke from an actual cigarette getting smoked. So I think that the fumes from a cigarette might be more damaging than your electronic.
Well, how about this? I
So I
have
just want to make sure that
I
we're
have
not-
we have an ordinance ready for the May 8th meeting, but we
Mm-hmm.
also find out that information.
That sounds fair to me.
Yeah, I would be curious to hear if anybody has feedback, but it seems like the Iowa Clean Air Act already, in the definition of smoking, seems pretty darn close to what you're doing with an e-cigarette. And so to the extent that's ambiguous, I think I just want to clarify that it would apply, as North Liberty did, to the vaping.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, do you know if Stella allows vaping?
Maybe I was wrong, but I had those signs made and put up by myself with nobody's permission.
Okay.
Because somewhere along the line, I got the impression there's no smoking within 25 feet of the entrance of a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
The problem we were having with the patios outside, people smoking there, and it just gets drawn inside the restaurant due to the ventilation system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm to blame for that, whether it's right or wrong.
No, I think you're
that's
you're right that the Iowa Clean Air Act says you can't smoke in those public places. I think the question is just the definition of smoking, whether that covers this vaping or not. And when the definition of my computer battery is dead, or I'd read it to you, but I think it's pretty clear. It's basically saying burning or ingesting tobacco products. But I guess I haven't researched it to see if someone's distinguished those two different activities. But I would just want to clarify, to the extent there's any ambiguity, that you can't vape where you can't smoke. And I think you're correct, and you have a duty to put those signs up already. So.
One thing while we're talking about it, with those signs being up there, I've noticed an awful lot more cigarette butts dumped on the city sidewalk on game days, because they don't pay any attention, or they're trying to make a statement to me to have to clean it up. So this is something that, depending on the council's wishes, that it ought to be good to enforce if we get an ordinance that's enforceable. But I think it's covered by state law, so.
I think you've already got littering problems, don't you, if people are dropping cigarette butts?
Yeah,
So what is a littering fine?
I can look. It's.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh no, you're good. I don't know.
That's okay.
It's a. I know it's a unique fine amount. It doesn't fall in
It's
line
like
with
$100.
Yeah, it's roughly that, plus court costs and.
Okay, so we'll get some answers to some questions and go ahead on May 8th. Okay, so I did want to announce that if any resident is interested in serving on either the zoning commission or the tree board, to please contact me, and we'll have an appointment ready for the April 8th meeting for both. And then the comprehensive plan, all the city council has met in small groups with Kent Ralston and another Sarah Waltz, who's a member of the MPO. And Kent said he is going to compile the information and he'll bring the information back to the city in 3 or 4 weeks. And so then, if you don't have any questions, we'll go to the city attorney report.
I don't have anything to add to my written report.
Okay, very good. And Chris, your report?
I sent out the usual clerk report and updated building permit spreadsheet, working with Stan and Virginia on rental stuff. So really nothing additional to add.
I did have a question on the complaints that were referenced by Stan in your housing report. Stan, where are you keeping all of those reports, and were they anonymous complaints or were they complaints from a third party?
You can sit on that microphone if you want.
Yowzers. They were not anonymous. I have the emails.
I'm just asking in terms of the sourcing. Okay, and where are those kept? Are they kept on a network? Do we now have a network? It's, I guess, one of the other questions I'm asking. Does the city have a network to place these in?
I think we're moving in that direction, but we aren't there yet.
Okay. And the last question I have is, do you see any opportunities for improvement on the reporting of complaints, especially now that we're going to have a big change in the rental program?
How public do you want them?
What are our options?
We could create a Facebook page. We could do public shaming. We could put it on the city website.
What are other cities doing?
They keep records of it, and if they're requested.
I guess one of the questions I'm getting at is, do people submit these through some app on their iPhone where they, or their phone, where they can take a picture of the issue and send it in through,
Yeah.
like a report it?
Right.
Or
The level of complaints that we're getting wouldn't warrant that system at this point. We could Google map them if people were interested in it. I don't think we are, but if we are, we could do that.
Well, I just want to make sure that the city has evidence at any point in time. You know, all the other cities had heat maps with respect to, you know, their rental changes in their program, and I thought that was very, very helpful to demonstrate, you know, frequency and levels of incidents, and we just didn't have any for our own city. So I'm, you know, looking forward or ahead.
I think Iowa City had heat maps.
Yeah, they did, but it was for their
Iowa
staff.
City did, but I don't think that East Lansing did or Mankato did or.
I want to say maybe Ames did, but I can't remember. Maybe Des Moines, but I can't remember. Too many cities that I visited with. So, okay, thanks for answering.
Anything else? Stan, did you want to add anything or
I
to your report?
followed up on those complaints again tonight. Finally made contact with a couple of the owners or residents. There's a disconnect there about expectations, even though it's been carried forward multiple times. I think it's going to be a steep learning curve for a few isolated properties. One came into compliance right away, but there was two that it's going to be they just don't get it.
Well, we'll see you Monday night.
All right.
Thank you. The treasurer's report, Lori submitted the treasurer's report and then the warrants list. Is there any other bills that need to be added or anything? Did you have any comment?
I saw the library bill in there, so I was very happy. It's before the,
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah.
Is there any objection to paying the warrants? Hearing none, the warrants will be paid by unanimous consent. And that includes that number 3 pay application that Josiah talked about. So now we'll go to police chief report, and the chief and Councilman Nick Herbold will go through it. Are you going to start, Chief?
Yeah, I can start. Just I don't have a whole lot to add to my report, other than council's consideration for, I guess, replacing Officer Sandefur. As you saw in my report, he accepted a position with Iowa City. He'll start there on the 25th of this month. His last day here will be the 24th. So he's working here up until his last minute. But and the city has, I believe we're still waiting on Iowa City's portion, but he has paid his, in the agreement that he made with Iowa City, he's paid his portion of his contract back to the city, and Iowa City, I believe, agreed to cover 2/3 of that. So he's made his payment. City of Iowa City will be submitting that at some point.
That's great.
I don't know if we need discussion if the chief has authority to replace him.
I think we should. And I only say that out of, having circulated the finance report with pie graphs. It was a really eye-opener for a number of people. And it was even more of an eye-opener for me to find some residents who could still remember the when we had one police officer. So I think it would be a healthy discussion. To talk about numbers.
Do you have some applicants?
We haven't officially opened applications yet. That's what we will do. But we do have a couple people who are already certified that would obviously be a substantially cheaper to the city than what an uncertified officer would.
Oh, somebody who'd previously contacted you?
Right. Yeah, I've been. Officer Sandefur has been in contact with some people that he knows that I know that some of them used to work for the department as a reserve. They've gone on to be certified full time, and they have interest in possibly coming back to the area. So they've reached out to me just once we do open the process. They're interested in, like I said, being certified. There's minimal things we really have to do.
Nate, how quickly would it be advisable to replace him? Because what burden is that putting on the rest of you?
Well, we're already down at full authorization from the council. We have 5 full-time. Currently, we're at 4 with him. We'll be down to 3. So that essentially means there's 3 of us to cover everything. And he was the only other officer that lived or lives in the geographic limitations of covering on-call. So that will fall solely on me now. For any time we don't have coverage, I will be on call.
Wait, so we're down to only 3 full-time
Correct.
employees. So what happened to the 5 when you were doing the budget worksheet sessions?
So
you mentioned 5
Right.
full-times, 1 part-time, and 2 reserves.
So we have 3 part-time and 5 full-time. One of those spots is the Chief Lyon's spot that's obviously open. And then with James leaving, that is 2. So we're down to the 3 there.
Okay.
I've reached out to the part-time officers. They've already helped where they can, but obviously they're part-time here. They have their full-time commitments as well.
Got it. So you're counting the chief's position as a vacancy.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's included in the 5 that was.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
I think we need to get something going.
Yes,
Don't you,
yes.
do you, Nick, too? I mean, we need to get a replacement.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest concerns we've talked about is just coverage, and like you said, like Chief said, that's difficult for him, and we've asked him to step up and do a lot on this temporary basis at least, and in terms of the hours of the day that you can cover with the number of people we're talking about having pretty soon is going to be pretty minimal.
Okay.
So I don't have anything else on any of those fronts.
But I guess maybe just so I have clarification, does he have authority to interview, or what kind of authority does council want to give him?
Well, from my perspective, just because you have, clarified that you're counting the chief vacancy and you have an officer down, or an officer vacancy, you're left with 3, I'd say go ahead and fill a 4th, because even if we as council hold an additional work session to discuss the police on its own, it wouldn't impact the 4 at all.
Right.
I don't see it impacting it.
Mm-hmm.
And do you agree to go ahead?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
Dottie, I think
definitely.
you said so too. So there's consensus for you to go ahead.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, another issue that we've been working on since last meeting is parking. Dottie already touched on what we had talked about in the January meeting, which is getting more uniformity, I think is what I'm hearing in terms of the no parking and how long you can park and that sort of thing. But the other, issue that I've heard about and we've heard about in meetings is the Marietta parking, the permit parking situation. I've reached out and talked to some people, and I think during the election time, there were people talking about parking. And with all the ideas that I've heard about the Marietta parking permit situation, it seems like the simplest one might be the best, but I want to hear what council has to say. Simplest one being we treat it as Dottie was discussing, we treat other parking areas in town, which is we have a sign up. The sign explains what's allowed, and then the police know how to enforce that area. I was trying to get a better feel for who uses the permits. We heard from a young lady who was using a permit for long-term storage I think it was our last regular meeting. Mm-hmm. And so I think everyone seems to agree that's not the desired use. But I guess without brainstorming further, I didn't know if the council had strong ideas on continuing with the permit process currently in place, or if there is interest in maybe just having Dottie continue the sign project with the Marietta parking also. From talking to local residents, it doesn't sound like, or people that live right by it, doesn't sound like there's typically a problem with it. In most hours of the day, more people are parking there at night. There's the potential for abuse, I think, that if we don't have any system, then there will be storage. But if there's the signs and if it's enforced, then it sounds like that might be a good solution.
Well, here's what I know a little bit about the Marietta parking. The Marietta parking first came to my attention about 2 years ago when individuals on Grandview court apartments wanted to know how to get parking spaces for friends outside of University Heights. That's when I first became aware that these parking slots were available for non-residents, and that they were also transferring the parking permits or selling them on game days. So that became another issue that I thought was interesting, because at that time we were only charging $20 per annual permit. So I thought, just from a safekeeping of public property, I just didn't think that was a wise way of charging and perhaps issuing the permits. So then I went out and I spoke to a couple of people that live on that street. They're primarily owner-occupied homes. And one of the gals who is actually moving away this year, I think in the spring, noted that Ron Fort would allot her 2 special permits that she was allowed to keep with her in her home, in her kitchen cabinet. And as visitors came to visit her home, because she doesn't have off-street parking, they would park in these, Marietta parking stalls. And I thought that was pretty fair, given the fact that they don't really have an opportunity to do off-street parking. And if her driveway is all full, where do these folks go? The other one that we have, and I'm not too sure who else on council received this, is the tickets that came about because of, I think it's Abe's birthday party, Abe and Aaron, and they had an impromptu gathering of family, and they too didn't have any parking. They went to Marietta and they got ticketed. So I think we have a couple of different circumstances we may want to think about in trying to resolve this Marietta issue. I'd like to know why we couldn't possibly have like maybe an 8 to 5, permitted parking, and then open it up in the evenings to different users. I don't know if that would be a problem. Maybe
Yeah,
Saturday and Sunday.
The problem you have with that is that the university, and especially the hospital being a 24/7 operation, they'll gladly park on Marietta, if you limit it to, if you open it up after 5, the folks that work night shift there will park there for free. That'll be full every night, and you won't have residents that could park there
Right.
at all.
The ideal situation would be parking meters.
Yeah, that would be an option there, at least for some of it. Leaving some of it as permit parking would be a good idea just for the apartment, the apartments there, so they have the option to purchase that permit because they live on the street. But I think Nick and I had discussed several different options, whether it be the meters or some sort of guest spots there for just the residents that live and don't have any other parking options on Marietta.
Do we limit the amount of permit parking or permit passes we sell?
We do not. It's always been
It's like still first come, first served.
Yeah, it's always been the letter that they got. I think right now there's 73 or 74 that have been purchased this year. The letter they get says there's no guarantee that by purchasing the permit there's a spot available. So.
And
I
what's
find
the
that
annual?
to be generally underused during the day.
Oh,
I mean,
vastly, yeah.
usually wide open. So I wonder if it wouldn't offer University Heights residents a little more flexibility to have it be permit parking, but also maybe 2-hour parking during certain hours.
I've also thought, going along those same lines, that could be an ideal spillage parking for events here at the community center. So if people, wanted to host an event that's going to draw quite a bit of people here, instead of fully packing the parking spaces here, they could be directed to Marietta.
Well,
So that's just
That's a
another option.
Different idea.
I
but
think
yeah.
also the spaces that are near George, a number of them need to be reserved for the Tower
Sidebar.
Park.
Those
Because
are already
there
marked
is
off.
no parking on Marietta from George on east.
Yes, I wouldn't include those in discussions of permit parking.
Yeah.
Those are for the park.
Yeah,
I guess I'm talking about.
because
it now.
that's a very popular park and we need to provide parking.
So you're going to look at different options and then.
Well,
Yeah.
we kind of have. I mean,
Yeah.
I initially thought that maybe meters would make sense. I don't know. I've kind of heard that people don't think meters in the residential areas seem like something they would want. But I mean, I'll continue to talk to people. I guess I was just interested in the downside of just having it be the 2-hour, 3-hour, or whatever the uniform parking is we're trying to have around the community. I guess part of it's an enforcement issue
Yeah.
too, because of how the spots are of chalking those tires and
Yeah,
Right.
and
enforcing it would be difficult.
Tickets are absolutely worthless because they just pile up and.
Well, that kind of leads to the towing issue we want to
Yeah,
talk about
and
too.
so we'd have
Right.
to put towing
Yeah.
zones on some of those spaces, so that the hours are limited, and then we have options.
Well, I guess the big question I have is just do we preserve the permit parking program or not?
Mm-hmm.
And if I guess that I haven't heard from anyone yet, but I want to again hear from more people about whether
I know people on Melrose have used it over the history because they have very limited parking and they buy a permit and use it. And I would think it was kind of always preserved for areas of the city that they just don't have any parking other than
Highland
that.
right there, 1 block away, doesn't have any parking.
But I mean, so are those people actually getting permits, or are we
No.
having?
That's
No.
my understanding.
My understanding is they used to go to Ron and get temporary permits, leave them in their kitchen drawer and use them whenever family came around. And Abe's understanding was that if they got a ticket, it would get ripped up and, there goes your parking program. So I'm thinking maybe what a nice, a program should address a couple of different scenarios, one of which may eventually mean that we hand out permanent permits to residents along Marietta for maybe 2-3 stalls permanently, and around them permit everybody else, or I'm not even sure what the other options would be.
Well, enforcement is an issue in the real world.
Well, in the real world, always.
Stan, you wanted to make a comment about the parking?
You have long-term residents that use that for cars that they drive periodically, and they only have single-car garages that have bikes in it, so they park one car in the drive leading to it, and then they have another car that they drive periodically that they park over there. So it's not just guest parking, it's not just, every once in a while, I mean, they use that as their parking.
That's
Then
my
poor.
understanding.
I don't want to get rid of that.
Yeah.
I just think we could also offer a lot more flexibility.
Yeah.
right, For short-term incidental
Yeah.
parking.
Yeah, because on a nightly basis, Virginia's right. There's probably during the daytime maybe 4 to 6 cars that are there on a regular basis. Overnight, maybe double that, but 2/3 of that block is empty most of the time. So there's probably a better use of that
Yeah.
for the residents.
Sure. Do you think you can put out some different scenarios for a program together?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just kind of depends if we want to look, if the 2-hour parking is a great idea, but I think we're going to get to that a little bit down on Gulfview. We have the issue down there with all-day parkers there.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of allowing people to be there for a short amount of time, but when we open that up, the issue we have is unless you make it a tow-away zone,
Yeah.
I don't want to be towing residents that are there at 2.5 hours, but at the same time, if someone parks there all day, there needs to be limitations on that, because I know I've talked to Paul a little bit about it. The 2-hour zone down by Stella, we have a few people who this year especially have parked there from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, and they
And you can't
have
do
racked
anything about it other than give
they've
them a
racked up the citations, but as the ordinance reads now, they get a 10-day notice
Yeah. It's
and
worthless.
before they can be towed, and that area is not a towaway zone.
I
It's
see.
just the parking.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's
by,
our ordinance.
So that's
Right,
that's
it's
the
ordinance.
agenda.
yeah, the ordinance just needs to be corrected to allow
So
for
that's
that.
why that
Right.
item is on the
Let's
Well,
agenda.
yeah, that's on the, so maybe we talk about that, because if it's kind of impacting how we look at Marietta, I mean, I guess I think the issue there is we amend the ordinance or we put tow-away zone signs up everywhere.
Tow away. And I say tow away not nonchalantly, just because I think it's the most effective notice for everyone, for those enforcing and for the person parking.
I'm sorry, are we talking about putting tow-away signs everywhere in town, or are there, like, is this for specific?
I would say just those specific, your 1 and 2 hour parking zones that are, Highland is an issue, because the vehicles that I had ticketed the day before on Gulfview moved up to Highland the next day and were parked there all day, and we got complaints about that as well. Well, they got tickets on 2 different days all day long,
Yeah, and
but then they have another 10 days from the notice. There's a couple vehicles that have gotten that notice, and they do go park elsewhere at that point because they know they'll be towed, but they also owe several $100s in citations
Yeah,
that
and
they'll
we-
just never pay.
and we never collect
I would like to
that.
approach tow zones slowly.
Right, and I would recommend, or I would like some direction from the council on to what degree those tow-away zones are going to be enforced. Is it if the vehicle's there for double whatever the time limit is, or at what level do we want to?
I think
to
the
go that
sign
route.
needs to indicate the hours and then the tollway, yeah. We'll look at it.
So it sounds like maybe we just kind of come with a plan in relation to that,
Why
and
don't
you
we
guys
go-
are,
Why don't we get in the car and drive around and look?
okay.
Because, we want to pick the poison.
But at the same time, do we want to change the notice issue? I mean, if you're saying that you have a lot of situations where you are having people rack up huge fines and then moving on, I mean.
Right. So the ordinance currently reads that if they get a 10-day notice because of unpaid parking tickets, after that 10-day notice, then their vehicle can be towed if it's found parked on the street in University Heights. So
Clearly sort of aimed at residents, not
right,
people who
and that's the problem. Everyone else takes advantage of what was originally geared towards taking care of the residents.
Yeah.
Is there support for that sort of change? And
So you know which streets this would apply to.
Yeah, I mean, the Gulfview and Highland and Lemur are the 3 that obviously are closest to the hospital and the university that are abused by far the most.
please, I think Paul wanted to chime in on.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul.
I'd just like to comment that a little 6 by 8 inch signs that says no parking on football game days and whatever are way too small.
Yeah.
And they're not in appropriate places. And I know you have to have 8 foot of clearance to a bottom of a sign, But it'd be better to have bigger signs that are more visible. I'm all for the 2-hour limit, but I think it's ridiculous, this day waiting period. If somebody has 5 tickets and they don't pay them, they ought to get towed.
Paul,
That's when they learn a lesson.
Paul,
And I think you need to change the ordinance from days to tickets, because it's my understanding, I don't know how many tickets that haven't ever been paid.
well, Paul, I've met with the Kent, Ralston, and the group down there at Johnson County, and we've talked about the problem with those little signs for football days, and we're working out a remedy for that. All the signage we're going to be looking at in conjunction, because we did it 3 or 4 years ago, and we're just going to look at it again to see if it can be clarified, made a little more simple. Some need to be revised, some need to be added, some need to be removed. So I'm doing it in conjunction with Kent Ralston. So,
But it's University Heights problem.
what?
It's the University Heights problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know Kent, but
And it makes it harder for your police to
I know.
enforce.
I'm very well aware of it, and we're working on it.
Okay.
We're going to be changing the signs and the notices, yes.
Thank you.
So, well, we're working on it.
So, do you have a recommendation now?
I think we have the feedback we need to put a proposal
Okay.
together at this point. We'll get that in front of, we'll try to get that on the agenda for next month's meeting. And then the last,
And you might check with Josiah about cost of signage too. Nate, you might check with Josiah on cost of signage
Well,
if you
I
need.
think that's part of this project I'm working on.
I know, but just check
Yeah.
with this.
Streets and sidewalks.
Have some feedback on cost.
yeah. The only other thing we wanted to talk about is just starting to, I want to find a time to either have a game day meeting or somehow get that on everyone's radar, because we're
Right.
getting to the point where I think people need to know, maybe probably need.
I was thinking sometime at least in May.
Yeah.
We should have, I'm glad you put that on the agenda, because I know that's one issue, but I think there's other issues that we need to talk about with what we learned last year for tailgating, and I know that porta potty rules was a problem that we need to address. And so, should we go ahead and try to set a date now, or,
Yeah, can we do that?
'Cause
Because
in
booked
May-
through April.
you know, because it's, what, the middle of April already? And of course, I kept my phone in the car. But, let's see, May 8th is our regular council meeting in May, in May. And so we could maybe say May 16th?
That's a Wednesday.
What?
That's a Wednesday.
Oh, that's a Wednesday. Oh, that's the 15th. 7 plus 8 is 15.
It is.
Okay.
Actually, isn't May 8th the second Tuesday of the month?
It is. That's our already regular council meeting is
Got
what
it.
I was saying.
So we're trying to meet before then?
No, May,
We can meet after for a,
month.
and then we can publish it
Okay.
The
for-
15th should work.
the 15th. And does that work for Virginia and Lisa?
Mm-hmm. That works for me.
On the 16th, we're going to have our Bike to Work Week breakfast. So if we stay all night, we can have breakfast in the morning. But anyway, okay, May 15th, we're putting that down, okay. And this is for, tailgating and reviewing ordinances and things for that. And I'm sure some of the public will be interested in that, in attending and giving some input. I know a couple people who are interested, and I'll tell them to come to that meeting. And then, did you have some other things, Nick?
Oh, that's all we have.
Okay.
The last thing I do want to add about the Marietta parking is
Yes.
that runs with the fiscal year.
Yes.
So
July 1st.
yeah, so June people will be wanting to renew those stickers that will take effect July 1. So we'll need to have either know that we're ordering more permit stickers or whatever the plan is, and let the public know, so the residents know if they can renew them, if there's different restrictions, probably by May's meeting, so that we know what we need for June when they start wanting to renew those.
Good plan. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so any other questions for police? We'll go to Sylvia with finance.
I'd like to just make a general discussion note for the public. Last we left off on the March 6th council meeting is that Spear Financial, which is Maggie, made a presentation to council on proposals for bond issuances for the limited purpose of acquiring green space and or parkland. I'd like to draw attention to the public and let you know that this is found in the March 6th council meeting, and it's the beginning of the meeting. It's about 30 minutes worth of a presentation. And then the second action that council took in March was March 7th. We convened again to discuss the presentation made on the 6th, and council decided to take to the voters a public measure initiative of $1.8 million to fund parkland and green space acquisition within University Heights. So I just wanted to make that final conclusion of those series of meetings and special meetings that took place for the public. And I understand that there will be additional information. All right, that's it. And then the next item for discussion is the dollars received from the property taxes for One University Place. And this was a culmination of some research that took place when we were first doing the city budget for fiscal year 19. As you may recall, there was a gap of dollars that were identified pretty much last minute. Legal confirmed that the city could not open up a line item that was set aside for low to moderate income housing in order to cover the gap for the year present. So that started off thinking, well, why can't we open it, and what's the history behind it really? That was more of it. And it turns out that it does trace back to the One University property tax revenue distribution stream, which is the pie chart to your left. Those are all the taxes that are collected on the One University Place development. The legend there gives you the lighter blue is all protected levies that are not for University Heights. Then you have other unprotected, then everything, let's see, protected levies. So let me explain the process. The process for this pie chart is the county will assess taxes on behalf of the city. County cannot collect taxes without the city's request or acknowledgement. So we do collect taxes, and what we collect is then under the Tif Agreement for One University Place, we remove out what is known as protected levies. Those are taken out. The Tif dollars do not touch protected levies whatsoever. What remains are the remaining slivers and the very large sliver of the Tif rebate. But what I wanted to make sure that we understand tonight is that what we're working with is the second bar graph over here, where the total revenue rebate to developers versus One University versus University Heights. With both protected and unprotected dollars coming into the general fund for University Heights, we're getting approximately $20K from One University Place. And that is going to shrink a little bit more, and this council needs to be aware of why and see what else we can do. Okay, the next slide shows you the subset of dollars with all of your same pie chart. And of interest for tonight's conversation is the orange and the gray line items. That's what we have called the 5% that I think locally people know it as, Maxwell gets rebated 95% of the TIF, and afterwards 5% is distributed and allocated. But the allocations that are taking place under the 5% are broken up to other government entities at a rate of $15,262 for fiscal year 19, and for University Heights General Fund, $9,130,000. So it's not the approximately 25,000 that you all saw in your fiscal budget when we were discussing it. We're not getting about 25K. We're getting substantially less, and it's because the 5% is appropriated to other agencies as well, not just the city. So I wanted to bring that to your attention because it's super important as we are shepherding, pretty much taking care of the budget or monitoring the budget for expenditures and planning around the budget. And we have all of these different entities approaching the city for funding capital projects or other initiatives. We need to be aware of where money is coming from and how much is really coming into the city. So for the next slide, I wanted to draw your attention that council action, and I spent a lot of days trying to read through the minutes of figuring out where the council action was. So Steve, I do need some help from you to figure out where the revenue for the city's apportionment was restricted solely to low to moderate income housing or affordable housing. I could not find that LMI appropriation, and that chewed up days of my time tracking it down. What resolution, what motion, what ordinance, and I couldn't track it down. But
You want to just call me to ask me?
I had no idea.
I don't remember the date of the meeting, but it was like one of the final meetings. It was held at St. Andrew Church. And I had been telling them all along that I wanted that money, and so we came up there for the vote. They weren't responding.
That's
I,
good to know. So
once
you
again,
can send me an
said,
email.
You need to put that money aside. And there was some
Was it
discussion
St.
about the interest on it, and I said, you guys are going to have to eat that, and that was it.
Okay, so I think whatever we call the interest then is
Sorry,
really all these other.
days.
Yeah. So, well, that kind of tells you the minutes were, they got lost. So in any event,
You were there at the meeting too.
after other government agencies received their apportionments, the city general fund receives approximately $9,000 for fiscal year 2019 and not the estimated $24,000. That's really important because that means we have overfunded a line item on the budget. And my recommendation is twofold. Number one, the line item is very limited and singular. It only goes for low to moderate income housing. And now that we have the Access Initiative from Johnson County, which is in full funding solicitation mode right now, they are taking pledges to try to accomplish that. I think consistent with affordable housing, we should probably also support a worthy measure for mental health, which is highly associated with homelessness. So one of the action items that I bring to this council is we probably need to amend this line item to include another public initiative that aligns with that LMI as well. And number two, I will be working with Steve Kuhl to make sure that our budgeting reflects the accuracy of the distributions that we are getting so that we don't experience underfunding in the budget and then get surprised later on. So that's the solution that I propose. I think it's a good solution. It doesn't exclude LMI. It just says share from this line item resources for mental health. And that is an important item because unless you cut resource or funding from another program or raise taxes, I don't see where else we're going to get the funding to do a capital contribution to mental health for the county.
So you're recommending revising the urban renewal plan?
No, I'm recommending that we revise. Well, is it?
I think that's what it is.
No, I'm not asking for a revision.
No?
I'm asking for the
That's
line
what I want to
item.
know.
I think
The-
it's just an
Is it revision?
interpretation
Yeah, just an
of
interpretation
the
issue.
language,
Right.
Steve, which you could probably give us.
So the idea of the 95% rebate TIF, and then what happens to that 5%, Sylvia is right exactly about how it gets apportioned, unless the council revises. I mean, the 5% is available for the city to access, but it has to take action to do it. You have to say we want it to pay for this or we want it to pay for that.
So the entire 5% is available to the city.
It is, but it's not going to happen without the council taking action. What I mean by that is you have to amend your urban renewal plan or
But even if you did the
there's a
amending
process.
of the renewal plan, it can only apply for things that relate back to the urban renewal district, which means that affordable housing or the access contribution to the county would not be part of wouldn't pass the usage test for that.
I don't know if
So
it would or wouldn't, but
It doesn't relate back to. So one of the concerns I had was in keeping with the spirit of the LMI designation, because, we completely walked away from requiring Maxwell to go through an entire testing to see if he even needed to contribute. And by my estimates, he walked away from about a little over $500,000 on affordable housing dollars. That's just there too. We need to keep alignment with that, because right now affordable housing has paltry support from this district here. So in keeping with that spirit, open up the line item to include a contribution to mental health.
Well, it's a reasonable application.
You need to revise it?
It's philanthropic, and it certainly
Otherwise,
serves the needy and the disenfranchised.
yeah, because otherwise you're looking at street and sidewalk repairs, Steve, by opening it up as a district.
there's a broad range of things that the council can use that 5% for. First of all, the Tif agreement. I'm looking at the Tif agreement with OUP, and I'm looking at my report to the council back in August of 2015. And as my report then says, the proposed rebate's 95%. The purpose for the change not being 100% was to create additional tax revenue for the city sooner and use those funds for neighborhood stabilization / affordable housing. The agreement will not specify or require that tax revenue be used for that purpose, but I believe the reason for reducing the percentage of rebate was to address those issues.
Okay, so if the agreement doesn't require us, then we take it off. Amending is off the table. So then,
Well, amending, so what I'm saying is that 5% sits there, and it wasn't in the TIF agreement designated for any sort of affordable housing.
that's what I thought, right.
Right, but the council now still, if it wants to access that full 5% and not just receive the apportionment that you described, it can do that, okay? It has to pick a project, it has to amend its.
Right. But my concern is that in picking a project, it doesn't pick affordable housing as a designated proper project. It's going to have to be streets and sidewalks, road repairs, anything that's infrastructure related, or yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's related.
It's
I don't think it's limited in that fashion.
Oh yeah,
I think there's
you've got limitations.
broad,
And it says district or
Scope.
something, doesn't it? It doesn't say city. I mean, it would be applicable to the county.
So infrastructure, possibly a park, anything that promotes economic development, which is a pretty broad description.
So then I say change the designation. I don't think you have to open up the TIF district to accomplish a designation. Designation LMI plus.
Yes, so the council, without changing the TIF arrangement, the TIF documents,
That's what we get.
can't just say, okay, we want the whole 5%. We don't want that apportionment. We want the 24.
And I'm not
the 9.
suggesting that tonight, because
Oh, no.
I'm sure that Jim Lane had a good reason why he structured this apportionment the way it was. There's no historical records that I received in addition to the TIF agreement whatsoever.
Okay. So my point is, using the numbers that were in your presentation, if the council wants to say, gee, instead of having the 9,000, we'd like to get the 24 or 25, the council may do that.
And what I'm saying, that's going to limit this council to not include it in these, LMI, much less mental health. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I don't know about that, number one. Number two, I would say, so let's say you've got $25,000 that you were going to spend on street repairs. If you could change your TIF to say, let's use the 25% from the TIF, or 25,000 from the TIF to pay for those street repairs, then the other 25,000 in our budget that we're not using for street repairs, let's use that for this other purpose.
And Steve, I'm not saying that because I'm just saying that. I'm saying that because that's the way. I'm not saying it because of the TIF agreement. I'm saying it because of the higher level concept that the TIF law, under which our TIF agreement operates, wouldn't allow us to have an intangible thing like LMI or mental health to apply. So if the goal is to keep mental health as part of a as part of that funding line, then we need to keep it as structured, which gives the council the most flexibility. Otherwise, we are going into a limited approach and getting more dollars, but it's certainly not going to go into mental health. And my concern is that Johnson County, which is dovetailing into the next discussion item, has approached Mayor Frum, and Louise sent it over to me to do some financial due diligence on it, and we are now being asked, are we committed to pledging a contribution to close a 20% gap on the capital funding? Right now, that capital funding is closed pretty much by 40% Iowa City, 40% Johnson County, with the 20% coming from local municipalities. And any amounts are being accepted. Of course they would be, right? But the point is that by structuring it under this apportionment, you can have an annual contribution amount that goes to this capital pledge that the city could make. And we do have a limit on it because the TIF is for 13 and a half years unless it's done sooner. So we would not be able to go beyond a pledge of 13 years. Well, we're now down to 10 years. So yeah, 10 years in this fiscal year.
So you're asking the council to consider.
I'm asking the council to consider renaming that line item as a local council option to include mental health capital project. It doesn't have to be that specific. We could be as broad as other county public health initiatives that relate to affordable housing, which homelessness does and mental disease does. I mean, those are some of the reasons why people end up being homeless, is they can't, keep a job to pay their rent, or, they're just homeless because they just have mental disabilities that don't allow them to do anything like to keep a home or an apartment or a dwelling place.
Well, I'm really excited that Johnson County is taking this on. I think there's a
Yeah.
huge need for it in our state. My husband works in the ER, and so he sees firsthand the way people end up in the ER and how long they have to stay there and how difficult it is to get care. But I want to give some more history on this money and how it got there and where it came from. This problem that we have in University Heights of neighborhood stabilization is not something that has popped up overnight. It's been well in the works for years now, and we identified it in the 2014-2015 council term. We had no resources with which to deal with it. The problem of neighborhood stabilization being that we've got blocks where we have an entire section of town that's at 56% rentals, and we have specific blocks within that that are 70% rentals, like Lisa's blocks. So there were a lot of people. Joe Frankel comes to mind when the TIF was being negotiated, that said you've got to fund affordable housing, and I thought there was a great opportunity for our town at that time to combine this idea of affordable housing with our needs, neighborhood stabilization. That's what we need right now. And so we've got this money. Steve says we actually can use the entire $25,000. We can use this to fund a workable program that returns older, small houses that are at market price, really unappealing to owner occupancy, and return those houses to owner occupancy and put a deed restriction on those houses for whatever we say we want to put it on, 25 years, that they have to be owner occupied. So I love using the Access Fund as a backup if we can't make the affordable housing in University Heights work. But I think we've got a need here that needs to be addressed, and that's what this money was intended to address. And we haven't addressed that fully. We're working on it from the angle of better enforcement and taking away people's rental permits, but I really think we need to have a proactive option on the table that shows that we're willing to encourage owner occupancy through other means besides punishment and taking away rental permits.
Well, my concern here is that, this is a new council composition, completely different players from the 2014-2015 council that intended that. So there's nothing that ties or binds the hand of this council to do differently. One of the issues that's come up is our most of our residents, like you've said, your husband himself, draws employment from a big organization like the hospital. My family draws support from the university. Many of our residents here work within the biggest operators of the county, most of whom are hit.
Sylvia, I think we know where
Right.
we stand on this.
But-
I think we need to hear from
but
the
I
other
think
three at the table to
part of
figure
the
out
thing
which
is-
direction we're going to take on this.
Part of the thing is that we need to also adjust, and I don't see how low to moderate income housing would be incompatible with sharing this line item with mental health services in the county. I just don't see it as incompatible. I think they can work together.
No, I agree with that. That's fine if that's the direction we want to go, but it then does not serve the purpose that it was intended to serve.
So are
which
you
is to address
prepared?
our needs here.
So let me ask you a question. Are you prepared to cut services or raise taxes on residents in University Heights
For what? For
to
funding
fund
access
accessing or to tell access to go away?
I'm not aware that that's a choice we're having to make right now.
This was talked about with the last council, which two of you were on. I recall Jim Lane brought this up.
No.
We could contribute, what, 30,000, something like that?
I think it
don't
was
know over-
30,000.
I don't know over what time period.
Mhm.
He said it would be a one-time
Contribution.
contribution to this. It would not be an ongoing contribution.
So, I mean, can we make a one-year contribution of 24,000 to this, or if we
For
send
what?
money to the
For
access
what?
fund, does it have to be the 9,000?
For a contribution for what?
The access fund.
Well, I think we could probably, it would depend.
You know, if
Yeah.
that's what the ask is.
I would
They're
like to
asking
see
for
a
$30,000. I
yearly
mean, give us
contribution.
I mean,
Don't,
for
wouldn't
one
you,
year.
Sylvia?
Like,
Right
that-
now-
I'm encouraged by that, because that means we don't have to choose between these two things. We can do both then.
Mhm. I'd like to see a contribution every year for, say, 10 years. If we could limit it and pay it out, I think that might be, I don't know. I'm just thinking it would be ready money for them on an ongoing basis.
Right.
But they may need it now. You know, I don't know. I guess we could ask them
I
what
remember
they
Jim Lane
prefer.
talking about 30,000 and maybe 10,000 a year or
Yeah.
something, a certain number a
Yeah.
year, whatever it
It's
would be.
such a meritorious project.
It really is.
And it serves the county. We've been lucky in University Heights not having a lot of
So
criminal.
what discussion was there when this came up last time? And I mean, it wasn't in our budget then, it's not in our budget now.
Yeah.
This isn't,
He seemed
this
to feel
didn't
that
show
we
up
had-
this month.
that we have the money.
The hotel wasn't on that council discussion either. A whole
No.
lot of things have changed, so.
And let me think. It was a one-time contribution, and when I reviewed your report that you sent, the PowerPoint, you know, they were assigning Iowa City a certain percent, Coralville a certain percent, everybody a certain percent, and we were a certain percent. Maybe it was 0.3% or something like that. And so I'm sure they'll take more money.
Yeah.
And you know what? Those numbers are brand new. I don't recall those being in the
I
Dobson
didn't
presentation.
I didn't see the numbers
So
either.
I remember seeing some other slides, but I didn't see the specifics.
It would be nice to know what they.
That was my
specific
understanding.
actions.
Well, she doesn't, my contact with the county doesn't have any. That's why they're saying any pledges are accepted.
Well, and I'm meeting with Lisa next week, so I could explore with her too, because she's the person on the council responsible for the Board of
On the county,
Supervisors. So I can find out more detail from her.
Okay, so we'll continue this discussion.
Right, so in May, I'm asking if there, let me just get by a show of hands, who is interested in supporting the mental health center, this capital project? Because that's where they need the help. They need the pledges to come through for the capital project, not operating expenses, only capital projects. Because that will determine whether or not the county comes to speak to us at the May council meeting or not. And that's why I asked you, if you oppose opening up to share the dollars in this line item with mental health, then I don't see a point for them to show up to a meeting where, we just don't have the cash right now for it, unless we access our reserves. So I'm less inclined to be helpful in that area because we're trying to do other projects within the city that are time sensitive. So my goal was to keep LMI here, make sure it didn't go away, and put in additional usage that was compatible with it.
Well, when you're asking for support, it doesn't have to be 100% of this amount.
No.
Just
No.
a portion of
Right.
it, possibly.
Right. I think in the presentation, there was, I think some cities were giving about $2,300 in a pledge. So
Whatever we feel we can contribute.
right. So
And I think I'm comfortable with Steve's interpretation that this, the way it's written, we are free to use the money as we see fit, as long as it's a reasonable use.
all right. So by a show of hands, is there interest to have Johnson County come and speak to us at the May council meeting?
What would they speak about?
They'd come and talk to
'Cause
you about
we
the
already
access. They would come and talk to you about it's a new council, Dottie. They should hear.
Who were you thinking?
I was here for that presentation last
You were
time.
here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't need them to come back right now. I could use the month to look at it more
Mhm.
closely.
Okay, do you need a presentation? No. I see no.
Okay.
Okay. It's good to know. So we'll talk about it in May.
Yeah, and I'll report on what I learned from Lisa.
Okay, very good. Does that take care of your 3 items there, Sylvia?
Oh, let me get back to that. Yeah, it does. And other than to say that, some of you might have seen some news articles about counties throughout Iowa having surpluses in their mental health programs, and I clarified with the county that they do. I confirmed one. They do have surpluses that would be that would have to be applied that are being applied over to the capital project. So they are using their surplus to do their part of the job, and so they now have a 20% gap of funding, and they're looking to local communities to fill that gap. And the way I look at it is, it's a good opportunity for us to do our share of the responsibility for mental health in our county. That's it.
Okay. Virginia, we're doing building, zoning, and sanitation.
Great, thank you.
I know you've only had a week maybe 6 days to prepare something.
Yeah, did my report make it? Yeah, it's in the packet.
Mhm.
Okay, so I put together a quick list of term goals of what I hope to work on over the next 20 months, and I expect that this will be sort of an evolving list as I get more feedback from people. Like I said at the candidates forum, if you think these goals are garbage, please let me know. And so I think the first thing we really need to work on, we'll be taking care of this next week, is passing the IPMC. I'm in the works of trying to work on a group that can do a climate action plan for University Heights, and I hope to meet with students at the School of Urban and Regional Planning this week to work on that. I think they could possibly do it as like a one-semester project for a graduate student. We have, now this is, I'm well aware this is not in my committee, but we need to really do something serious about a couple of areas in town where we've got little kids who live there, and we've got traffic that's too fast. And I would love, I don't need to be involved in the solution on this. This is obviously...
I can't hear you, hon.
Oh, sorry. We've got a problem in town that I heard a lot about on the campaign trail of a couple areas in town where we've got traffic that goes too fast. My main areas of concern are
Kozer
like the
especially.
100 block of Kozer,
Yeah.
where we've got a lot of kids, and then also Lemur Court. And so we need to do something about this, before school lets out.
Mhm.
And I don't know what it is we're going to do about this. I don't need to be in charge of this. I just want to see that it gets done. So Dottie, this is obviously more sort of your area. Nick, this falls under your area too. If you two want to work on this together, I'm fine with that. If Dottie, you'd prefer to work with me on that, if I'm more available than Nick, that's fine too. So that's
There-
on my list of
yeah,
goals, but
There has been discussion about
I'm
this.
very
and I can-
flexible on how that gets
Yeah.
worked out.
Yeah, I can fill you in on that.
Okay, great.
And we might, I think last year for a brief period, they had the sign, didn't they? And that would be probably a good idea, the electric signage.
Yeah. Anything we can do, I think would
Yeah.
be greatly appreciated. I'm going to have more information next month about what I would like to do for a affordable housing program to return rental houses back to owner occupancy. But I'll be very open to hearing feedback on that. You know, again, the details are all very adjustable to me. I'm not particularly tied to any of them. I've been talking to Josiah about soil conservation and coming up with a way that when we have construction projects, that we reuse our good old native soil when we put them back into the boulevards instead of replacing it with really crappy fill like what has been done in numerous places around town. We'd like to get a new resident guide going. I hear Lisa's working on that in some regard. And then at some point, I really would like us to think about funding a revolving loan program for sewer replacement, because we're going to have a lot of households in the next 20 years that get stuck with a huge bill at one time, and it would be nice if we could, you know, help people cover that bill when it arrives, and then they pay it back through the property taxes or whatever. So my report for this month, I've been out with Stan to look at some properties where there's some complaints. I met with the MPOJC like the rest of you did, and with Josiah. Steve Ballard and I will get caught up this week. The most immediate priority on my plate is the special meeting next week so that we can get our rental housing ordinance in place. And then I've got a couple of announcements. Community Cleanup Day is April 21st from 9 a.m. to noon on Marietta Avenue. We will have scrap metal recycling again this year. And the only other comments are that please don't bring any hazardous waste, no appliances, no TV, no computer equipment, no yard waste, no cardboard. And we will, as always, have the too good to throw away section. And if anyone wants to volunteer to help load and unload cars, I'd greatly appreciate it. Secondly, we've got a vacancy on the tree board that'll need to be filled. So if you want to apply for that, please talk to Louise. And then the other thing on my radar is that I think we need to talk about Airbnbs at the May meeting, because we don't have anything in place right now for how
Now-
those are handled.
Yeah. Now, with respect to the Airbnbs, I had requested a couple, maybe research from Stan back in November, I think. And I know that North Liberty is one of the corridor communities that has adopted Airbnbs, but I'd be happy, I know, Stan, that you're very busy, so I'd be happy to take this one off of your plate and put together a table of what Airbnb ordinances are out there, just because I think it's a critical, it's a critical ordinance or guidance that we need to have in our city to allow investors that are coming in and people who are leaving know what they can and can't do with their houses with this new rental program.
If you want to put some research together and send it over,
I will.
Within a week would be good. So we've
I
got enough
can't
time
do
to
a
go through
week.
it, but
I can't do a week. I mean,
Okay.
Stan hasn't been able to do it since November. So Virginia, we've tried, but you know, got to work with what you got to work.
so what would be?
I'll, as soon as I can. As soon as I can. I know how urgent it is. That's why I asked for the information, because
I have information that I can share, but I'm not going to share it until we get the rental property ordinance passed. That was more important to me. So
okay.
we
Well,
need
let's-
those regulations
Sure.
in place before we move on.
Do you
Airbnb.
mind if I take a look at that folder first and start organizing it, maybe with a table of comparative elements?
I mean, if you've got stuff that you need to hand over for transition purposes, please. do.
There's nothing to transition. As a matter of fact, you're saying that you've got research. I'm happy to create a user-friendly grid to compare regulations on it.
Okay. Okay.
Are there any questions for Virginia?
Just to clarify, I can help do the Airbnb, but Stan, are you not going to do anything about it until after next meeting, or I just need clarification where we're at.
I'll turn my information over, but I mean, and if it's not in a usable format, people can adjust it as they see fit.
Okay.
Paul?
I'd personally like to thank Virginia Miller and Dr. Novak for bringing to attention how bad the trees were in front of my building. And as you know, we had it all scheduled to have trees removed. And the night before, one branch fell over and went across Melrose Avenue. 3 good Samaritans had it all cut up by the time I got there.
Wow.
A red-haired lady with a turquoise blouse, thanks to Louise's picture, but I don't know who did it, but that was a very, very nice gesture, and and we got rid of a safety
Hazard.
issue. So thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sorry for the outcome on that, but
And the police did a really nice job directing traffic and being there and coming in right away. Thank you very much, Nate. You did a great job. Thank you, Paul. Got lucky there, huh? Wasn't during the high time of traffic.
Didn't hit a street light, didn't hit a.
Didn't fall
It was
on a
kind of a
car.
miracle in a way. Okay, we'll go to e-government. Did you have something, Lisa, yet? Okay, fine. And then what I've tried to do with the agenda is take some items that people want to include and then put them in this new category. And I just named it council discussion items. And these are items that at this time Sylvia recommended, but anybody could put an item there that's not in their category. I'd put the item there because of our meetings running so late, and I wanted to get a hand from the council if anybody wanted to spend, I'm thinking these might be like a 10-minute thing, like a discussion of the Flomstab House. Does council want to discuss that some tonight?
Well, I just want to bring council and the public up to date because in addition to...
Well, I know, but I want to ask them
Sure.
if they want to discuss that tonight. I mean, because we've had these meetings go on, and I thought it would be, I'm just trying to be helpful in trying to streamline these meetings. And this is my attempt here, and so
Can we
I
give
want to
them
find
each
out from
5
the
minutes?
majority if they want to discuss some of this. Do you want an update?
yeah.
I like,
Yes.
yeah, I like the idea of maybe time limitations. So it doesn't
Well, I
leave out
thought
enough.
10 minutes
Too much.
at the most.
5
Which
is-
means like each council can speak 2 minutes if they so
Oh, you mean for
speak.
total
Okay,
discussion.
Sylvia,
Sure. All right. In a nutshell, the Staub House was a holdout issue in the November, September negotiation periods for the Marriott Hotel. Did not have majority support from the council that was proceeding with the hotel, but there was strong residential interest in keeping that house. So I want to be very clear that I held out the vote in favor of the Marriott to make sure that that house came with the building of the hotel. The interesting thing is that in order to get a compromise on the 4 votes necessary for the Marriott, there's a little technicality in the conditional zoning agreement that this council now needs to be aware of, and that is if we don't find property within 6 months of the signing of the conditional zoning agreement, the right to demolish the house is with the developer. And that deadline is coming up in June. So as soon as that became the prevailing language that operated to protect the Staub House, I started working with residents who do own property in University Heights to see if I couldn't pitch them the idea of leasing, renting, and or outright buying. So I just want to let the public know that there has been an extenuous amount of effort going into trying to secure a site for this location. And second to that, it really makes it important for this council and to know that, we need to find a spot for this house to land.
So we don't have any leads right now.
That would be correct.
Okay, and do we have any idea what the cost is to move it off that property and within, like, say, a 1
That cost is not picked up by the city or the taxpayers. That
Right,
cost is absorbed
but
by
we
Greg.
need- whoever shows interest in this house is going to need to know what that is. I think it would be a good-
My interest is us, so it's been limited to making sure that we land a spot.
Okay.
It has not been at all
So what is
to,
the cost?
I don't know what the cost is.
If the city is the landing spot, what's the cost to move that house?
It would be free if we are if we have the property first. So if we renegotiate
I
at the,
don't think that's true. Don't they?
it would be because the first move by the developer is covered by them. So if we find a spot
Before they.
before
so that
they have to move
50,000 he
it,
talked about is the cost I thought it was the cost to move it to the corner.
yeah.
To lift it up and
Yeah,
move it to the
well, under
corner.
the agreement, the first move is picked up by the developer. So that's why I've been working very, very diligently to find the permanent spot because
Well, how
that-
about we put this on the agenda next month? and
Well,
s-
no, because I asked that it be part of the conditional zoning agreement for the rooftop.
I know you did,
So-
but this is a new council, and
That's
we
true.
can see how the council feels about it.
But I'm just saying that we don't have, if you're going to be voting on the rooftop hotel, you might as well vote on the Flom property, which is part of all of those agreements. You don't want one agreement here and then the other one getting renegotiated over here when your leverage is gone.
I just think this
Otherwise,
council needs
I
to decide what they're going to do with this.
I just don't
if
think-
they're also
I don't
in
think
agreement
Greg-
with the last council. I mean, I know how you two voted, but I don't know how these three would vote.
No, that's
I'm
fair.
I'm not hearing ideas on someone who wants to take this house. I think, it's looking like it will be demolished unless there's some idea that comes up. I just haven't heard anything
Parkland?
that's
I
promised.
assume we can salvage it?
Salvaging, yeah,
As opposed to
salvaging
Straight out
pieces of
demolishing
it.
it?
Possibly afford to maintain a house as anything. By
Well, that's an excellent point, and this is what I've been cautioning. I tried to persuade some of the other counselors to evaluate this, but under the promoting tax from the hotel motel, it's a broad category where you could refurbish an old house.
I think it's possible. I think it's just whether it's a good use of city funds, and
Yeah,
I just haven't heard an idea where I think that seems, that
No,
it sounds like a good
it's
use of city
wasteful.
funds.
All right, well, if that's the majority consensus to not salvage the stop house.
Salvage,
it,
but
they
not-
wanna salvage
Not
as
to,
a city-
not to
Again,
keep
if you've
it.
got if we have a concrete idea that could be evaluated.
Well, we could,
I'm
but
willing
it's
to
premature.
evaluate it, But we don't.
Well, and see, that's why the conditional zoning agreement time limit needs to be extended. You will know by June whether or not you have or don't have. But unfortunately, the conditional zoning agreement reads by June. If you don't have it in writing to the developers, they get to dispose of
Yeah,
it.
so, well, what you're alluding to is putting it on the Swisher tract, is that correct? And I just want to say, I don't think it's a great idea to put a property that's only like minimally occupied next to a place where there's a lot of transient and homeless people living.
Well, that could be studied. Right now, I just don't know any other way to reconcile the public interest in sparing the historical house. This is what it's coming down to.
I think we should get it on the agenda and really see if people speak out by next
Yeah.
meeting. Because I just haven't heard, even the people that I had heard who were interested in salvaging it in terms of, I think it was in relation to integrating it into a use on the hotel, the property that now is going to be a hotel, Fawn property. So I haven't heard anything since then that piques my interest.
I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I don't doubt that there's some people who are interested in it, but I
Okay, we'll put it for the May
think that makes sense.
8th agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the next item is discussion of consent agenda materials to expedite meetings and reduce meeting costs for the taxpayer. Does council want to talk about this? I see a no here. No. Scotty, you want to talk about?
We have the materials, we can review them.
That's what I was going to say, that,
Okay, very
and that
good.
material should have been included in the
I have it.
February, so it's
It's
two.
not on the agenda, so we have to include it.
So, no, it was in March. It was in March that it should have been included as old business. All right, and that's it.
Okay. I can't help but notice, Jerry, you came in. Did you want to speak?
Under announcements,
Yeah.
if I could, that'd be great. Can I come clear?
Yeah, could you come to the microphone because tonight we're being filmed. And we want to see you.
You're the boss. Hello, I'm Jerry Zimmerman, 1434 Grand Avenue. I should have come earlier, but I got hung up at the restaurant. I'm sorry. And I don't know the difference between public input and announcements. Forgive me. As a resident, I think we need to support all our employees who have served us and who are past employees who have served us well. I think that Chris Lyons had more support for his job than anything that was before the council when I was a council member. What happened to him is fairly unknown to the residents, and the residents are concerned about that, and Chris's reputation has been adversely impacted. My understanding is that there is a report that Chris has asked for the publication of that report, and the city is withholding that from public dissemination somehow under Chapter 22. I'm sure Steve understands why, but I don't think anybody else does. It is baffling to me, who litigated cases under Chapter 22, and when employees asked that information be made public, it was made public even under very adverse situations to the public institutions which I was litigating against. The law may have changed in the time when I practiced. I think it behooves the city to make whatever information that has been asked to be made public, so that no more adverse impact will be had on Chris's reputation, his livelihood, and his life going down the road. He served diligently. My understanding of the investigation, and I had an opportunity to talk with the investigator, was that the report would show that he served admirably, and did a great service for the city, enhanced its reputation with other communities, and generally was very, very fruitful for the city of University Heights. It is unbelievable to me that the city has not released the information that it's been asked to release to save his reputation. Thank you.
Steve, would you like to make a comment?
No, he can't.
Okay.
Well, I think he can, because
He's chosen not to.
he's chosen not to.
He
Thank you.
can't.
Thank you. Is there any other announcements? Okay.
I do want to make an announcement as a resident.
Yes.
I am taking off my counselor hat here, and I'm saying that I thoroughly agree with Jerry Zimmerman's comments and observations. It is the number one, if not two, issue that's of interest to residents. They don't want to hear about the Rooftop restaurant. They want to know what happened to the UHPD and what's happening in a small town since Ron Fort left and all the litigation surrounding it. And Jerry, actually, I got yelled at by a very angry resident who supported Chris and said, "Aren't you a lawyer? Why can't you do something about this?" So I completely
I've heard more
concur.
about this issue since I've been off the council than I heard about any issue when I was on the council. It's very relevant to the
It's inflammatory.
Okay,
It's taxpayer
I'll say a
information.
couple of announcements. Remember, next Monday, April 16th at 7 p.m., the council is going to consider rental housing ordinances at that time. And then, of course, as Virginia said, April 21st, Saturday between 9 and noon on Marietta is the cleanup day. And so, are there any other announcements? Then I'd like council to consider a recommendation, would someone read the recommendation of city attorney to meet in closed session pursuant to Iowa Code Section 2151C to discuss strategy with counsel in matters where litigation is imminent, where to disclose would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Nick. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And second by Dottie. Roll call vote.
Casada,
Aye.
Maher,
Aye.
Moore, Miller,
Aye.
Herbold,
Aye.
Carey.
And then we also have a proposal to meet in closed session pursuant to Iowa Code Section 21.51J to discuss the possible purchase of particular real estate where premature disclosure could be reasonably expected to increase the price the city would have to pay for that party. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Dottie, second.
Second.
Second by Miller, Virginia Miller. Roll call vote.
Maher,
Aye.
Moore, Miller,
Aye.
Herbold,
Aye.
Casada,
Aye.
carried.
Okay, we'll go now into closed session. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Okay, we're returning to open session. Is there any objection to adjournment? Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned by unanimous consent. Thank you.